You're listening to the best of the bravest. Interviews with the FDNY's elite. You can book somebody months out, and it feels like it's forever and a day to go until that booking date comes up. But really, the time flies, especially when you stay busy. And busy we have been on the Mike the New Haven podcast. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 307, which is going to be volume 55 now. Double nickel of the best, the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. If you haven't checked out the previous episode, volume 43 of another miniseries, the E-Men inside the NYPD's emergency service unit, which broke the record previously held by another E-Man. Pat Pogan held the original record at 3 hours and 12 minutes and 1 second. And Tony Johnson broke that record at 3 hours and 17 minutes for that podcast. It was a long interview, certainly, but it was a good one. He had a lot of interesting information, and we'll bring it back for a part 2 in a couple of months. Tonight's guest is interesting. I will introduce him momentarily. But first, a hello to everybody tuning in tonight via YouTube, LinkedIn, as well as Twitter or X or whatever it is that you refer to it these days. A couple of sponsors to go through, and that, of course, as always, is MC Media Editing Services, my consulting company. First up. Need advice on how to start your podcast? Frustrated with the editing process? Can't find a voiceover guy? Hi, I'm Mike Colón, and I'm here to help. I'm the owner and founder of MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company for all things media, where I can offer you consulting advice on how to get started, and once you get started, editing, as well as voiceover work, all for a very reasonable price. If you want to reach me, you can contact me at 917-781-6189 or the email that you see listed here. I'm always available, and I'm always willing to help. Again, 917-781-6189. Why go to some giant consulting firm that's going to charge you an arm and a leg when you can just come to me? If you want to be stress-free, the way to go is to call MC. MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company. A lot of projects coming up with that I'll be working on in the coming days. Now, you may not need a PI, but whatever the case, listen, sometimes life happens. Life be lifing, as they say. So if you need a PI, go to my man, Billy Ryan. He's the best you got. The Mike the New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the Elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson and Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike the New Haven podcast. Fidgeting with this microphone. It's a good microphone, but man, it's tough to get a good angle on it. But okay, there we go. All right. Well, thanks to Billy as always. My next guest has the FDNY in his blood. After all, he is a third-generation firefighter, and for 15 years, he was on the line and along the way worked in some pretty elite commands, such as Squad 41 and Squad 61, both in the Bronx, North Bronx, South Bronx, respectively. Also had a spell in Rescue 4 in Queens, so he definitely has a lot to talk about tonight. Somebody I discovered actually through Twitter. You know, we connected on Twitter. I reached out, sent him a DM, and thought, hey, listen, what's the worst he could say? No. Thankfully, he didn't say no. And he's here tonight for this volume 55 of the best and bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. And that is Lieutenant Mike Roy. Mike, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. How you doing, Mike?
Oh, yeah. One mic, two. I just noticed 2 mics on the Mike the New Haven podcast tonight. What has been a beautiful Friday here in New England. So, you know,
yes,
from one mic to another. It's good to have you. Long time coming to get you. So before we get into anything, I don't even have to ask you where the love of the job began, because as I made mention of in the introduction, we could pull the picture up. Third-generation firefighter, and it goes back to the 1930s in your family, as I'm seeking the photo now, and there it is. So that's where it began. But as your love of the job grew from seeing your family doing it over the years, specifically with Eugene Roy, as you see there, appointed in July of 1937, which goes way back. Tell me, where'd you grow up?
I was born in the Bronx, Parkchester. I guess I lived there for 7, almost 8 years. And then neighborhood started to turn a little bit, and mom and dad decided it's time to go. So we moved out to Williston Park on Long Island. Grew up there another 7 years maybe. And then in maybe 6 years, my father retired and time to go. So we moved to Florida.
And that's where it started for you in the fire service. And of course, William Fisher, hello to you in the chat. He says he was in Rescue 4 for at least 2 years, maybe three. I didn't mean it like that, William. A spell, of course, can imply multiple years, and we'll talk about tonight as we go. But good to see you, William, as well as John Costello and Darren Phillips. And for those of you that may want to contribute with the super chat on YouTube, feel free to do so. Pinellas Park, Florida is where it started for you. So sometimes it's a little bit easier in certain places to get into the fire service. The volunteer corps are open. There's a lot of opportunity. What was the process like down there, and how early were you chomping at the bit to take the test or enlist however you could and start the process of being a firefighter?
Since age 5, I think the first time my father ever brought me to the firehouse, 96 engine, South Bronx area, and they put me up in that seat behind the wheel, and that was it. That's all I ever knew I ever wanted to do. So when we moved to Florida, graduated high school, June 1980, got in the fire academy September of 1980. Because down in Florida, unless you're a very big department, which there aren't many, you go to the academy yourself. You apply to go to an academy, get your certification, and then you can start applying to fire departments. Again, like I said, unless you're a big department, like Tampa or Miami, Jacksonville, they have their own academies. So I went to the academy, got my certification, graduated in December of 1980, started EMT school in January of 80 at St. Petersburg Junior College. And there was openings for ambulance drivers in a local, in Pinellas County, an ambulance service that actually did the transport for all the fire departments in Pinellas County. So I started doing that and kept applying to fire departments. And there were, I guess, just after the fiscal years, they started to, get their act together. And April 10th, 1981, I started in the Pinellas Park Fire Department. It was a great place for me, anyway, to start. They had 2 stations in Pinellas Park, but they were opening up a third. Because when we moved to Florida in 1977, the state's population was only 9,000 people.
Oh, wow.
Now it's 9 million people in the state of Florida. Now it's 21 million. So it started to grow exponentially in the late 70s and into the 80s. So they were going to build another station. They needed more manpower. They gave a test. Apparently I scored high enough to get hired. Like maybe I was the 4th one hired. I'm not positive of how many they actually hired off that list. It's been 43 years ago, come this April, so I don't really remember the exact. But it was a great place. I mean, I started with what they called the super crew. Lieutenant Dan Jones, Blair Bender was the chauffeur, and he was the first guy on the job, first paid member of the Pinellas Park Fire Department. And then they opened up the station, and then a whole bunch more guys got hired. Guys got promoted. They made captains, district chiefs, and then they promoted lieutenants. So there was more firefighter openings, and it started to really grow at that point. And I was hooked. I couldn't get enough of it. I just wanted to learn. So Dan Jones, who was my lieutenant, not long after I was there, got promoted to district chief of operations. And he knew how much I really wanted to learn. So what I did was I got a hold of him and said, listen, send me to the training. Because they had a budget, to send people to go do some training. And he would send me and a couple other people. And then we basically would come back and train the shift on what we learned. So being a smaller department at that point, I mean, I was badge number 47. And there was still about 47, 48, 49 people there at that time, maybe 50. So we would go out, get all this training, come back, and I had kind of the training bug in there too. So that was a lot of fun. And again, I couldn't get enough. Send me to this training, send me to that training. And he was all for it. So the 2 or 3 of us would go out and do the training, come back and train the rest of the department. And that really ignited a fire in me. And I think the chiefs took notice, because I think it was only there 2 years. And it wasn't like if a lieutenant was off for the day, they'd hire another lieutenant. They would have acting lieutenants. And they saw my interest in it. And there were a bunch of people who had been on there for a while and really did not much of an interest in it. You get assigned to be an acting lieutenant. So you were the official acting lieutenant for that shift. So if any lieutenants and I was on C shift. So if any of the lieutenants happened to, not work that day, you went to whichever, station, and you were the acting officer that day. So I wouldn't, go there. I was like, well, I got 2 years on the job. I'm an acting lieutenant. Let me tell these older guys what to do. Everybody kind of knew what to do. So it was basically, doing paperwork and just making sure everything that was supposed to be done was done. And that was fun. I enjoyed it. And then the lieutenant's test came up, and took the test. I think I was number 4 on the list. I think there was like maybe 20 something guys who took it, and they only hired one guy. So, I think I was number 3 on the list before I ended up getting called for this job, because while I was on the Pinellas Park Fire Department, I got my vacation after 1 year and came back to New York. First time I've been back in 5 years. Never really connected with anybody while I was gone. Came back, and most of my friends were volunteers in the Williston Park Fire Department. So what would happen then was, then in those days they had the rec room, the tap was flowing. It was great. I went down there and to see all the guys that I grew up with, and they're all volunteers. Some were already city cops. It was great. So they were like, oh, what are you doing down there? So, well, I'm a fireman in a city down there. Like, oh, you kidding me? New York City's giving a test, like this year. And I was like, really? Oh, no, I never really gave it much thought. I mean, listening to my grandfather, my father growing up my whole life, listening to that stuff. But I think I'm in Florida. This is where I am. So a friend of mine said, listen, I got a friend in Brooklyn. You can go ride with him. His name was John Paris. He worked in 227 engine, Brownsville, Brooklyn. Got over there, 24 hours I rode with them, came back to Williston Park, told my friend who I was staying with, got to go get me the test, the application. I got to take this test because the job was just so different than what I was doing.
No, of course, yeah.
I mean, they're going to fires. They're doing, and like, this is what I remember from listening to my father and my grandfather all those years. I said, I think this is where I need to be. So I got my friend to drive me in to Church Street or Thomas Street, put in the application, $65, and that was in June of 82. September 82, took the test, and then that's when the lawsuits started from the women's groups and delayed everything a while. So it took me until 1987, July of 87 when I got on. And I haven't really looked back since. None of those, well, maybe I should have stayed or what would have been. And like my friend Dan Jones, who was my lieutenant and chief, a few years after I left, he became the chief of Chapel Hill, North Carolina Fire Department. And he retired a few years ago as being the chief for 25 years. That's usually kind of unheard of, having a chief for 25 years.
Oh, yeah.
But great guy. He was my mentor when I was in in Pinellas Park. And I learned so much from him, not only about the job, but had a lead. Hopefully he'll watch this one day. And he always had this plaque at his desk in his office. And I believe it read something like this: every job is a self-portrait of yourself, so mark your work with excellence.
I like that. That's good.
40-something years ago, I've never forgotten that.
That's how good it is.
And it's like, and he always did. I mean, he was a straight shooter and a squared away guy. He was a main instructor at the academy in Pinellas County, and he'd bring me there to help him sometimes. Like, yeah, we need some guys to help. I wasn't the main instructor, but they were doing live burns back in the day when you could do live burns. So, right. I was there. There's actually a picture. I don't know if I sent it to you or not, helping, some of the people on the line. Had a fire blown out the window of one of the old houses in Pinellas County, maybe St. Pete or something. But I used to go there and, help them out on the live burn days. I wasn't big for standing in front of the class to say anything. But when it came to the hands-on stuff, that's when it was a lot of fun. But,
of course,
it was him that kind of really guided me in the way to get to the city. So got to the city. And then from there, it was get to the academy, go to the academy. Nobody knew I was on the job in Florida when I went to the academy. When you go in to get sworn in that day, nobody's really there. It's just a swearing in, just the guys, no families or anything. Back then anyway. It might have changed now, but nobody knew. And they were doing a roll call, just to make sure everybody who was supposed to get sworn in is there. So I'm sitting there and I'm listening to names. I'm just listening to names. And I had met a couple of guys when we did the psychological exam. They were cops. And I'm sitting there. I'm like, I never took one of these psychological exams. What is this? Just tell them whatever you think they want to hear.
Not wrong.
Don't tell them the truth. Tell them what you think they want to hear. And I'm cracking up. And there's like 300 plus guys sitting in this room with one moderator. And, guys are joking around, laughing, talking. And, the guy's like, this is serious. Don't talk to anybody. You have to draw a house. They're like, don't put any fences around it because they think you want to keep people out. Stupid little things like that. Lots of windows because you want light to come in, things that they had taken to become a cop. But I never took any of these things, so I had no idea. So it was great listening to them. And a couple of those guys were actually in my academy class. So I heard his name. Then you kind of look around to see where he is. And they get into the R's. And then I hear Stephen Randino. And I'm like, Randino, I'm turning around. He grew up in my building in Parkchester. As a kid, we were best friends in Parkchester. And I was like, Stephen Randino, no way. So after they did the roll call, I go into the cafeteria where they told us to take a break. I go up, you Stephen Randino? He's like, yeah. I said, Mike Roy. Holy crap, I can't believe it. Because we hadn't seen each other at this point in almost 20 years, maybe. 18 years, hadn't seen each other, but we still remember because we were best friends that whole time.
Right.
So never told anybody what I did. And then they were like, all right, guys, break up into groups. Guys in Nassau County, guys in Suffolk, guys in the Bronx, Queens, guys, Westchester, Rockland. Get in different groups to get in carpools because the parking lot's not that big at the Rock. So they want, to get guys in carpools. So it turns out the three other guys that lived right around me were still great friends till today. Tommy Sidlowski, Chris Piazza, and Rob Delato. We were the carpool. I never told them. I still had Florida plates on my truck because when I got the call to come up, I just put in my notice at Pinellas Park, and within a week, I was gone. And your cars better not have out-of-town plates if they pull into this parking lot because they got guys from Jersey, Connecticut, wherever. But I don't think I'm commuting from Florida every day. So, but
should be good.
I figured I should be good, but for the first 3 weeks until I got a day to actually run over to DMV and get my plates changed. And then they were like, what's this International Association of Firefighters sticker you got on your car? What is that? And I was like, I got busted. I'm like, I was a fireman in Florida for 6 years in a city and stuff. You were on the job. You never told us. This is like 3 weeks in, just to the 3 guys that were in my carpool. I was like, yeah, I was on the job down there, and this and that, and like, we got to get a study group together then, and it was a lot of fun. Still great friends with these guys today. We get together, still have some beers and a lot of fun. But then when it came to the academy classes, to like, what's going on? One guy was a volunteer fireman. One guy was a corrections officer in Nassau County, and the other guy was a cop. And the guy who was a volunteer fireman was a cop too. So they really weren't up on everything. And believe me, Florida and New York are 2 different things altogether.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
2 different things. So down there, you don't really get as much training. The academy class you get is the basics, just like the academy is. But the academy goes into a little bit more, because building construction in Florida, you have what would be like a taxpayer. You would have a metal warehouse building, because they're very inexpensive to build. And back then, they wanted the cheapest things they could do. And they would have private dwellings and maybe your occasional townhouse. But there was no procedures. It was just like, okay, everybody pull up. And all right, the first engine we assume is going to be stretching the line. And when I got there, we had a ladder company. The truck was in the apparatus bay. The story will come up a little later about that, but it didn't work. It was it was like a 1960 Mack rear mount or something. Mm-hmm. And like I said, that story will come up in a little bit. It's just weird how these things connect. It's a small world.
Right.
So they finally decided to get a new ladder truck. So they bought a 100-foot Sutphen. There isn't a 100-foot building at that time in Pinellas Park, let alone Pinellas County for the most part, except maybe a couple in St. Petersburg. 2 stories, that's as far as you go. So they bought this truck, but they didn't have the manpower for it. So they spent $350,000 in 82, 83, something like that. And it sat on the apparatus floor because they had nobody to drive it out there anywhere. Had a fire. One of the guys we worked with, his father was actually a retired Pinellas Park cop, but he also was a photographer and would do some news stories for the local paper. So when we had this job in this big, it was like one of the old Florida, like Queen Anne type houses, 2-story. I mean, fire was blowing out the first floor, and the ladder truck was sitting on the apparatus floor. So after that, with the news article came out, then they said, oh, we got to have at least one guy in the truck to get it there. And then once we get it there, we'll figure out what we're going to do with it. So they needed somebody to go on there. So I was one of the guys that got trained on it, that we could man it. So for a while there, I was the only guy on the truck. 3 guys on an engine. We had the rescue, which is an ambulance that doesn't transport, but right. We call them rescue down there. Mm-hmm. And me. So most of the time, they were going out the door all the time, and I was sitting there with the truck. Then, you get the automatic alarms and they send everybody, or they get a report of a structural fire, then everybody goes. Mm-hmm. So as time went, they started getting more money in the city because, this is the early 80s and Florida's starting to boom now, and they're getting more money. They got to hire more people. So they hire another guy, and now we have another guy on the truck. This one guy they hired, his name is Lou Scalfani, an East Meadow guy. So once he got, I'm giving the tests now. That is Louis. I'm giving the tests now for the guys coming on the job. And he heard my accent. He goes, "You from New York?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Where?" I said, "Wollston Park." He goes, "I'm from East Meadow." And we started talking a little bit after the test. And His father was on the racing teams up here. You know, like the volunteer fire departments have the racing teams. Mm-hmm. So it was, you know, a connection right away. We became best friends. And then now me and him are on the truck. Me and him only. So whenever the thing, and, you know, we're ready to work. Like Louis ready to go. You know, he ended up becoming a DC in Pinellas Park. And I just saw him about a year ago. And for some reason, he thanked me for, you know, him becoming a DC, because somewhere along the line, I guess I told him after I come up here, read everything you can, mm-hmm. because our books here to study for an officer, it's ridiculous. I've heard guys say they studied harder for the FDNY Lieutenant's test than they have for the bar. Wow. I'm not kidding. And there were some guys that'll probably shake their head, say, it can't be. And other guys be like, yeah, he's right. Because I heard it from a guy who took the bar. He said, I studied harder for the lieutenant's test than I did for the bar. I could stretch my arms out as far as I could, and all the binders of everything that you had to know as a lieutenant. Wow. So I told him somewhere along the line, read the regulations, because we really didn't have a lot to read. It rules and regulations and some SOPs. That was about it. But more and more, they started developing more and more. So me and him, we get this fire at an apartment complex, 2-story. And it was like one of those where, like the old motel looking, where the doors are outside, the railings. So there's a fire in an apartment, and me and Louis pull up on the truck, and the district chief who was working that day, old timer, Jim Dobbins, you know, goes, all right, go back to the truck, get the tools, and force this door to the adjoining apartment. And me and Louis are standing there with the tools in our hand. Because that was one thing I noticed back in the beginning when I worked in the city, Pinellas Park. You go there, everybody would walk into buildings and everything else, and nobody would have any tools. The officer might have a flashlight or something, but that was it. Nobody had any tools. So me and Louis, it's like, okay, now you got to go back to the truck. And in Florida, things aren't like in New York, where everything's on top of one another. You could be back in like 10 seconds, 30 seconds. You know, it's a distance. So we bring it, you know, he's got the Halligan. I got the axe and the hook, and he's like, force the door. He puts the Halligan in the door. I bang, he pops it open. The chief is kind of like, huh, wow, okay. Because they're not, one, used to having the tools right there and seeing something happen that fast. So we went in, there was a little extension, no big deal. And, you know, after that, we got an attaboy. I mean, we've gotten in trouble quite a few times after that, because we see smoke in the distance. Me and him are driving around on the ladder trucks. He sees the smoke in the distance, and we're like, is that in our area? I don't know. Let's go check it out.
A little mutual aid action. Come on now, you know.
Nothing was transmitted yet. Nothing on the radio. So it was like across a half a block past our district. So we're like, all right, well, let's go see. I mean, it's a half a block. So we drive over, and there's a whole bunch of brush going, and it's starting to communicate to the building. And this ladder truck that we're driving around in had a pump, 300-gallon tank, and some hose on it. So we start stretching, put in pumps, start putting the thing out, and save the building, basically. We get back to the station, and the chief's like, I want to talk to you guys. And we're like, oh, this is going to be great. He's going to give us an attaboy. He's like, I had no idea where you guys were. You never told us anything on the radio. I'm going to separate you two guys. So he separated us because I guess we were too aggressive. Mm-hmm. So that was a learning experience. But we end up getting back together later on, and it's like, hey, Louis, what do you want? You want an egg cream? Because we, you know, in the North, egg creams were the big deal. And down in Florida, who makes egg creams? And they had this one little community of stores where they were making old-fashioned egg creams. So in the afternoon, it's like, all right, come on, let's take a ride. Driver training, go out there, get some egg creams, driving around our district, you know, no big deal. But it was fun working with Louis because we came from the same background. So now that I'm up here, I tell him, read. Because when I got on the job, you give you a probie manual, You're doing everything in there. And then it's like, all right, and The Rock, they have the taxpayer. They have a 5-story tenement. They have like a 2-story frame set up that's obviously made out of brick and cinder blocks so we can burn in it. But then you have the burn room. So there's a difference there. They start teaching you right away in the academy. This is this type of building. This is how you operate. This is this. This is this. Big difference from Florida. Oh, there's a house fire. Stretch a line. There's one other story I have from Pinellas Park. Middle of the night, we're using a reserve engine. I rode the back step plenty of times down there. Right around the corner from the firehouse, Port of a structure fire, we pull out. Flames are blowing out the window of the front of the place. The lieutenant, or the acting lieutenant on that day, Ed Bigger, grabs the line, brings the line around. I'm taken out of the back cabinet under the hose bed. I'm taking out the mask. I'm masking up and walking around the building. And I get to the back door, and it's the kitchen. So I go in. There's nothing in the kitchen, but it's banked down, and it's hot. The guy from the rescue, the ambulance, was paramedic, Steve Pilo. His father was a New York City fireman. Another guy, we all hung out together. And he comes in behind me to do the search. So I'm on the line by myself. The acting lieutenant is pushing the line in the back door. And I'm going in to past the kitchen to where the fire is, in the living room, dining room, bedroom over there. I start knocking it down. We get the fire knocked down. We come outside. Steve did the search. Nobody's in there. Turns out the cops come up to say the guy lit the house on fire, sat in a closet with an axe. So if anybody was coming to get him, he was going to get them with the axe. I was like, what?
What a lovely individual.
Yeah, like some of these things you can't make up.
What a great guy.
Yeah. So there was Pinellas Park wasn't rocking it with fires. Mostly EMS and lots of car accidents. I mean, we got so proficient with the Hearst tools, airbags. I mean, when it came to emergency stuff, we did a lot of that. So in the academy, you're not learning Hearst tool. You're not learning airbags. You're learning hose line advancement, what size hoses to use for different things, how to stretch, what kind of stretch, truck work, the basics. So when you get to the firehouse, because the academy, when I went, was only 7 weeks. And 1 week of that was peace officer training. So that's when they took the 25 cops out of we have 125 guys in that class. They take the 25 cops and make them go do other stuff because they didn't need it. They were already certified.
Right.
So we'd sit in there bored to death, listening to the fire marshals talk about all these different things. But a 7-week academy, and boom, you're going out to the field. So a friend of mine's father used to drive one of the commissioners, and I said, Larry, do me a favor. I want to go to Manhattan. Because he was in the fire factory, 58 engine.
Oh, yeah.
If I can get into 26 truck, or if I can get into, a Harlem company, I'd really love to go to Manhattan. Our academy class is probably a dozen guys who went to anything that's good. Everything else was basically slow companies. A dozen guys. One of them was one of the deputy chief's sons or assistant chief's sons. He went to a busy company, obviously. A couple of guys with some really good hooks went to some good companies. But that was it. Everybody else backfilled into, either your B or C company kind of type of company. And only a dozen of them went to an A company because they later on kind of assigned everybody a letter based on the amount of runs and works that you did. So I said, Larry, I want to go to Manhattan. And I said, if you can't get me in there, just make sure you get me to Manhattan. So we're graduating, and they're sitting there telling you what your assignments are before we go out and finish our, final graduation ceremony. So they start giving it out. I'm like, all right, I'm going to have to wait a little while to hear, company because I'm going to be in the 20s or 30s or 40s or something. I think they went down 3 guys, 1, 2. They went down 5 guys, and then they get to Mike Roy, engine 7. And I was like, I wasn't even like ready to listen, you know? And I was like, what did he just say? He said 7 engine. I'm like, okay. And I said, well, where's that? So myself and Timmy Westall got assigned to 7 engine. And after we find out, let's graduate, we go down to, the company, introduce ourselves. The boss signs you in the book, gives you a group number, the whole 9 yards. And that was the start of my career. I'm glad I was in Manhattan. And looking back at everything, I'm glad I went to that house. The day of graduation, my father was there. He flew up from Florida. And 47 Engine was there, the first company that my grandfather worked in. The company was there for some type of training. Yep, there's Gramps right there. The quintessential fire department photo, right?
Yeah, Dalmatian. It's got everything.
Oh, yeah. And the day of graduation, 47 Engine is there. So I'm with my father. I said, we got to get a picture in front of 47 Engine. I mean, what are the chances my grandfather's first company is going to be at the Rock the day I graduate? So that was like a sign. It had to be a sign that my grandfather's company was there. Like he was looking out. So getting to 7 Engine was a treat. But you don't realize it when you get there. You go into Chinatown, you go into Lower Manhattan, you're 2 blocks behind City Hall, so anything that's going on around there. And Manhattan, especially down there, there's no private dwellings. Any tenements there were over toward Chinatown. You had loft buildings, you had high rises, some factories. Was second due to the Trade Center. And ironically, my first run on the FDNY in 7 Engine, box 8087, World Trade Center. That's the same box they transmitted for 9/11.
In 1993, I believe, right?
Run on the job, box 8087.
For what, a fire?
Yeah, odorous. I actually had the ticket because it was one of the things for nostalgia I wanted to keep. I can't find that thing anywhere. I've got other ones like the first job I actually went to, but it was probably, like smoke or something, or an alarm. But they filled out the box when there was an alarm there for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting on the rig. I'm like, this is great. My first run in the FDNY. And the guy who was actually my mentor in 7 Engine was Teddy Penfield. He was on the job 27, 28 years when I got there, his whole time in 7 Engine. He'd been downtown for a lot of stuff. I can
imagine.
They used to relocate into Brooklyn during the war years too. And he'd seen his share of work. And little guy, strong guy, like an iron worker too, scrawny, strong. He made his own workout bench up on the 3rd floor. Like that was Teddy's gym. Anybody want to bring anything? That's fine. You don't touch his bench. He made his bench out of wood. That's his. You don't touch it. So getting in there, he's like, no. Where I had the nozzle. He's like, you got the nozzle. You sit behind the officer. But he's like, no, I'll sit behind the officer. You sit at the door. So I'm sitting at the door, got my arm out the window. We're going down Church Street or whatever street we're going down, West Broadway. And I'm like, all right, we're going to pull up in front of the Trade Center. We're going to get out. We're going to throw the roll-ups over our shoulder. We're going to walk in. This is going to be great. Turns out to be a little anticlimactic because we're driving down. All of a sudden, I'm like, we're going to make a left right in front of the Trade Center. And there's a driveway that goes down underneath the Trade Center. So we're going in and we go down underneath. And I'm sitting there I'm looking around like, Teddy, where are we going? Oh, no, we're second due here. So we go underneath to the fire command station. which is in like basement level 1. So that's where all the delivery trucks go for the whole Trade Center thing. That's where the elevators for not the normal elevators, the other, I can't even think of the name of the ones.
I think like maybe for the freight or whatever.
Service elevators, the freight elevators. They're all down there. So if something's going on, you can put 3 companies in that thing, no problem. And I actually had to do that a few times. But I'm like, and then all of a sudden they turn the rigs off, all the lights go out, everything. We're just sitting under there. What we do? Oh yeah, well the chief goes over to the fire command station and he listens because 10 and 10 or first due, they basically pull out on the ramp of their quarters with a Port Authority radio, and the Port Authority cops tell them what's going on. Oh yeah, it was a false alarm, or just smoke, or defective alarm, or whatever. And okay, start them back up and go back. So my first one turned out to be a little anticlimactic, but that's okay. A lot of different jobs down in Lower Manhattan. The busiest day I ever had in 7 Engine was a few months after I got there. Chinese New Year of 88. Before Giuliani put the squash on all the fireworks and everything else. I mean, they were just, the fire in a trash can was great for them, besides the fireworks and the dragons and everything else. So we had 7 jobs in 24 hours. I was doing a 24. 7 jobs in 24 hours, and all but one were in Chinatown. Tenements, taxpayers, Canal Street, restaurants in a tenement. It was ridiculous. It was like one after another. And that's what I wanted to go there for. That's one of the reasons I came to New York. So bunch of different jobs, helped Lieutenant John Bruckner from Ladder 1 at Beekman Hospital. There was a fire in one of the rooms where turned out to be an AIDS patient. The machine was going, the bed was starting to catch fire. This guy's got tubes everywhere. Bruckner grabs him off the bed, hands him to me and another guy. Get him on a stretcher outside, and later on the nurse is like, he had HIV, and fluids are everywhere when he saw, the tubes are coming out. Right. So another wake up call to be careful what you're doing, and a few things here or there, nothing spectacular. Projects, yes, project fires. We definitely had some down there. And then it came time for this, maybe April. You got to do a 30-day detail. Nowadays, it turned it to 3 years. Then it was 90 days before that. But when I got on the job, it was a 30-day detail to an opposite company of what you were assigned to, out of the house. But because Ladder 1 was short on some manpower, and Manhattan, especially Lower Manhattan as a whole, the 1st Battalion was always looking for guys. So they were short, and they said, no, you're not going to leave. You're going to stay in one truck. I said, okay, great. So I get in there, and I'm all over it because I love the truck. I love truck work. So I'm all over it, doing everything I can do. And before the 30-day detail is up, the captain, Tom Pilner, comes over to me and says, I want to keep you in the truck. And I was kind of taken back, like, oh, okay. He goes, you want to stay? And I was like, sure, Cap. You got a captain of a company asking you if you want to join his company. I thought it was kind of like, professional suicide to say no. So a couple guys in the engine, I don't think were too happy about it, but captain's asking me, I'm not going to tell the captain no. So I went there, and it was great. We had so much fun. The guys in that company, I had so much fun with. We got work because we used to call it the busiest ladder company for work south of Canal Street. there was only 2 other trucks out the Canal Street. So, we were the busiest one. And other guys in 10 truck and 15 truck would say, oh, yeah, you guys, you're definitely busier, when it comes to the work. Because we had, like I said, we had Chinatown. We had these loft buildings, textile type buildings.
And it's not even the fires, not to cut you off, but it's also like the MBAs, all the non-fire emergencies that you can go to that keep you busy too, not even just with the boxes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we had some accidents down there, but the traffic was just so slow down there. You really didn't have too many MVAs. Okay. That was like later on we would get them in different companies. But the fire duty was not bad in one truck. And some guys from 10 truck wanted to come to one truck because they were going to get some work. And 8 truck was just above us in Tribeca. And back in those days, there was not that much vacancy in a lot of, especially the loft buildings. You had the AIRs, the artist in residence, and that was kind of it, because a lot of stuff had left. They were tearing down some buildings to build condos at one time. They did that right across the street from the firehouse. They built this 52-story apartment building. And, at that point, we knew the neighborhood was changing. So we actually had a few jobs in the loft buildings. The one job we had, it's at night. All the stores are closed up. All the loft buildings, the textile industry, they're all closed. Gets report of smoke in the building. So I get there. I got the irons. Captain Bradley is the new captain of Ladder 1. We pull up. You look. You can't really tell. And then you do this, like, oh, yeah, this place is full of smoke. So I popped the door. Captain Bradley and I don't remember who had the can, went down into the cellar, and he's yelling at me, search the first floor. So I mask up, I'm searching the first floor, and it's like a textile place. And textiles come on long rolls, and they're heavy. And they're just laid up on top of one another all over the place on tables. So I'm searching under the tables, and I'm like, all right, this is a textile place. It's closed. It's like 10 o'clock at night. What's going to be in here? I'm searching around. I got my hands on one table, and all of a sudden I grab a pair of feet. And I'm like, and then I look, and it's like 2 feet sticking out underneath like this blanket laying on textiles. So I'm like, what the? I'm shaking it. I rip the blanket off it. There's a guy laying on there. He's like overcome by smoke because he was the owner of the building. Hires a couple people to stay in the place at night so it doesn't get broken into. I grabbed I'm like, I'm shaking the guy. He's not coming around. And I grab the radio, 1045. I grab the guy because the table's up high. He's like, at least waist level at that point. And if anybody knows me, I used to work out a little bit. I would say maybe a lot of bit. Work out pretty religiously. I just grabbed this guy, threw him over my shoulder, just like, the whole characteristics of you grab somebody, the firemen carry, and I carry him out the building. The chief's looking at me, the aide's looking at me. I grabbed the guy, I put him down along the side of the building, and I'm like, call, there was an ambulance there. I said, come take care of this guy. And I go back inside to do the rest. The captain's saying he's got a 1045 in the basement. Him and whoever was on the can that day, they carry the guy out. The fire was in the cellar. And what happened was the guy that was upstairs sleeping, his buddy went and got a girlfriend and went down in the basement, had some candles, the whole 9 yards, wanted to make a little romantic scene. She left. She knocked over a candle, started lighting up the textiles in the basement, and the guy's trapped. He starts kicking out the windows with his bare feet of the cellar. And even if he did, they had bars on the outside of that, so he wouldn't have gone anywhere anyway. So right. Got him out. Captain gets a Class B out of it, and I got a nice job.
Good work.
Yeah, good
Attaboy.
work. Another loft job we had, and this brings me back to thinking with these loft jobs. So my grandfather, because they had a lot of loft buildings in those days. Even up in the 47 engine area, a lot of loft buildings, a lot of textile stuff, cellar, sub-cellar. I mean, those days, no masks. So those were some tough sons of you know what. Because, I mean, even with the mask going into a cellar, especially if it's hot. It's a chimney. Just like going to a basement of a private dwelling. It's hot and it's tough to get down. You got to get down fast. Sub-cellars, oh man, that's a whole different animal right there. So one day I'm working, and because, like I said, Manhattan was having a hard time with manpower, so they put out a thing. If anybody else around the city wanted to come to Manhattan, I guess they were going to get some extra overtime out of it too. But if they want to get some Manhattan experience, if you're on a lieutenant's list, if you want to get some Manhattan experience. So we used to get guys coming in and out all the time. One guy from the Bronx, Bill Tulipaine, pulls up on his motorcycle. We go to project jobs. All he's got is helmet, a coat, doesn't bring a mask, has a 12-pound maul and a Halligan. And that's all he walks in with. No boots, it's like just a black pair of shoes. Bronx guy. But he was a tough son of a gun. So John Bruckner, the lieutenant, it was one day we're working and we had a guy, Kevin O'Rourke. He was killed on 9/11.
I was going to say Rescue 2. Yep, that same guy.
O'Rourke. At this time, he was in Squad 1. So he says, you know what? I'm going to go to Manhattan. I'm going to get, give it a try. Nicest guy in the world, Kevin.
No, he was. Yeah, sweetheart.
Loved this guy. Always had a smile. Always brightened up the room when he walked in. And he had that typical Irish personality. Hey, brothers, how you doing? Hey, how's everything going? And he was so fun to work with because he went to a lot of work in Squad 1. At that point, I really didn't know what a squad was. And he came over and we had this job in a loft building. Textile building, cellar fire. The textiles are piled up. We went in once, me and John Bruckner went in one side, him and somebody else, I don't remember who, went in the other side. Me and John Bruckner are crawling across the top. So we got the ceiling and the textile, and me and him are crawling across the top because there was a break in the cellar wall between the two basements. So we're going in and we're all the way to the back, and the fire's on the other side. So we're trying to see what we got on this side. All of a sudden we got, a Mayday, member down, in the cellar, and we look at each other and we're like, it's got to be them. So Kevin O'Rourke and the other guy, it might have been Tom Fennick, I don't remember, get pulled out of the basement. Kevin's not breathing. He just, the CO, the CO was ridiculous. It just took him out within 5 minutes. If we were even in there that long, the CO was just so high. Get him in they're doing mouth to mouth on him. Back in those days, it was still, the process. Doing mouth to mouth on him. EMS has got oxygen on him. Now they got him breathing. They take him up to the hyperbaric chamber at Jacoby. So that was kind of something, John Bruckner looked at me and said, yeah, it's, one of those things where you almost lose a guy. So it was kind of bone chilling, but loved working with John Bruckner. Great guy. Another story about the Bronx, but this is Manhattan. Gas leak in the projects across from One Police Plaza. Get a call for gas leak. So the truck goes, we get up to 17th floor, whatever it is. We get out of the elevator. Yes, definitely gas. And now we're doing the nose to, the door jams. I go right, a couple guys go left. The officer comes around with me because I think I had the irons again. And get to the corner, all the way to the end of the hall. Put my nose in. Yeah, this is it, Lou. This is the spot. So bang on the door. Guy opens the door, but he's got the chain on it. I said, oh, no, you got a gas leak. We got to come in and shut your gas off. And the guy starts talking some language we have no idea. It's not Spanish. It's not Italian because it's not Chinese because this is right over by Chinatown. Like any of the accents or languages you would expect to hear in that area, it wasn't one of them. It's like, the boss looked at me like, what is that? I don't know what that is. So the guy's getting ready to close the door, and I take the Halligan and I throw it in the bottom of the door so he can't close it. So, it's like, all right, this is when they still had housing. So call the housing police, get them up here. So we tell them, listen, you got a gas leak. We got to get in, fire department. So the cops come up. They, it's like, what's going on? Gas leak. Guy won't open the door. And the guy's talking whatever language he's talking. So the cop takes his hat off, puts it in the door. Says, police, open the door. We got to get in. Bam! Guy shot at us. He shot at the door, and the apartments are made out of cinder block. So he shot right at the door jamb. The bullet kind of ricocheted somehow off of the cement block or made it spoil and crack. And like, I feel something hit me in the chest, and the cop like takes a step back and goes, was that a gunshot? And I'm like, I look at him, I'm like, you're the cop, you're asking me? I took my Halligan out of the door, and the first door to my right was the door to the stairwell. We just back up, and because there's an apartment door right next to it.
Right.
So the cops back into that. Now they got their guns drawn, at the door, and me and the lieutenant are just standing there like, he's like, all right, we're out of here. Let's go. This is theirs. They can handle it. And then like seconds later, the stamping coming up the stairs, the ESU cops with the shields and the whole 9 yards. I mean, like they come storming up. It was like, okay, I'm in Manhattan and I got shot at. I figured if I was in the Bronx or Brooklyn, maybe that would have happened. But I remember my father telling me that in the war years, they used to shoot at them. They should shoot at the rigs. That's when the little slits on the steel windows, and the jump seats behind the officer. And it was just, I was like, oh, okay. You hawk up pounding a little bit. Oh, man, I just got shot at. That's one for the history books. So I'll make sure I keep that one. Yeah.
Note to self, if they start speaking a foreign language you don't understand and it's a gas leak, back out.
They had the issue show up, and they actually showed up to the firehouse later to let us know what's going on, the two cops. And they go, it turned out to be Turkish. The guy was from Turkey, spoke no English. So what the PD did was, which I thought was actually pretty smart, they went up to the restaurant district, to a Turkish restaurant, once they figured out what it was, to get somebody who worked in a Turkish restaurant to interpret. Because it wasn't like a mass amount of Turkish cops on the job back in those days. So they got a guy and they talked him out of it or whatever, but he ended up going to jail. But one of my experiences. So we had a job in a high rise. Like I said, Manhattan, especially Lower Manhattan, this is something that, Forrest Gump could have used in the movie. Lower Manhattan, or Manhattan as a whole, is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get, because you figure you're walking into a simple loft building. Next thing you know, it's interconnected to two different buildings, or the basements are interconnected, but the upstairs isn't. It's just like, you don't know. In some of these tenements in Chinatown, they're making SROs, single room occupancies in one apartment. They got 7-8 people in their own little plywood room that they framed out with a padlock on it, because we had jobs in there. One of the Chinese New Year's, I think, we grabbed like 6 people out of one of the apartments, because the fire was going in the kitchen. And as soon as you opened the door, you were at the kitchen, and the fire was in the kitchen and blowing pretty good. So by the time the engine got the line up there, we're going past that, pulling people out, and, we're forcing plywood doors with padlocks on them. And some of them even had bunk beds in them. So you never know what you're going to get in Manhattan, ever. High rises, been to high rise jobs, where it turns into, most of the times the sprinklers handle it. But sometimes sprinklers might not be in a certain spot. This one job we had, I don't remember what year it was. It was before I left one truck. New building under construction on Greenwich Street. I thought it was the American Express building, but it was something else right next to it, I think, maybe, or maybe it was that at the time. I don't remember. But we get a report of a fire in a high-rise. So Captain Bradley's working. Me and Tommy Inkin from Ladder One. We have the exterior. So everybody has their positions. Everybody knows where to go. So we take one of the elevators up to the floor below. We get up there. There's smoke up there, but it's not that bad. So there's some guy on the floor, so one of the workers, and he like is screaming, "Oh, the guys are trapped! Guys are trapped!" So Tommy goes with him, and as we pass like a hallway, the guy's like pointing to the wall, and I'm like, I see like you can almost like see the heat vapors coming out of the elevator lobby. So I go down that hallway to get a good look and see what's going on. And in that elevator lobby is the door to the mechanical equipment room for that floor. That whole elevator lobby. And in high-rise buildings, they're usually pretty large. Filled pallets, wood that was protecting desks, file cabinets, chairs, cardboard boxes, you name it. They piled up in this whole thing so the guys can come in the service elevator, throw it in, bring it down. They just kept doing that. But there was some kind of, I believe, some kind of labor dispute, and somebody lit that up. But there were like 4 people in the mechanical equipment room that were trapped. They couldn't get out. So, I mean, it was ripping. And I came around and I said, "Tommy, it's ripping. There's no way anybody's getting in there." So Tommy started banging through the wall to breach the wall. Unfortunately, we started breaching where the plenum comes in from the ceiling of the whole floor as the return. They have the returns throughout the whole floor. You have the air conditioning ducts, but the whole plenum above the drop ceiling is the air return. And it comes into this one shaft. So we're beating through the wall. I mean, we start double 5/8 on each side of the studs. So it's supposed to be fire rated because it's a mechanical equipment room. So we're banging through this wall. And we're like, what the hell? Like, is this a concrete wall? Because it's double 5/8. We're beating the hell out of this wall. So we finally get through one side. And we're like, oh man, we got to do it. So we start banging the stuff off the inside. And now you're in the plenum part. And then there's a giant vent that the air comes through to go into the room for the system. Tommy gets in between the 2 walls of where the vent is, and where we just breached the wall. He gets in, he's sideways, he's got the Halligan in there, but because the room or the space that he's in is only this big, he can't do anything with the Halligan. So he pries the top of it, gets the top of this vent off, which is a good probably at least 3x3, 4x3 or something. He gets it enough that I was able to reach in, grab the top of the vent, and pull it towards me, like rip it out of the wall. And like they heard us coming. And as soon as I popped that out, like 2 heads come popping out of, whatever hole was left between the vent being down, leaning against the wall that we breached, and the top of where it was. They came crawling out of there so fast. If you take a lighter and go to a piece of like paper towel, and right before the paper towel goes off, how brown it gets?
Yep.
The heat coming behind these guys coming out of that room. Their white shirts were about ready to go. That's how hot it was in that room that they were in because of the fire load outside the door. I mean, it was tremendous coming through there. I mean, the engine did a great job coming in, putting it out. But it was just getting these people out of it. They couldn't get out of that hole fast enough. And myself and Tommy end up getting one of those notorious acts. So we got a Class A out of it. And the company got a unit citation out of it, which was nice. I mean, it was good. We get down to the lobby. Lieutenant Jim Ellison, legend on the job.
Oh, yeah.
Tommy Baker was a legend in Rescue One. I lived around the block from Tommy Baker growing up at Wilson Park. I knew Tommy when he first got on the job. You know, I was a little kid, you know, buffing around the Volley Firehouse all the time. Tommy was there. And he was always great to us. We lived around the block. He was always good to us. We come down, me and Tommy come down from that floor after the job is over, and Rescue One's in the lobby. Ellison and Baker come over to both of us. He goes, "You breached that wall?" And they're like, we're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "That was awesome." He goes, "That was a great job. That was good thinking, you know, the whole line. You know, that was unbelievable. Great job." Getting to, I mean, you can't get any better, you know, acclamation
higher praise
than getting an attaboy from two legends, let alone, you know, an officer or some other fireman. Hey, great job. You know, two FDNY legends, you know, it doesn't get any better than that. So then it came time, as time goes on, we get a few more jobs. You know, we had a great time down there. My friends were telling me, one of the guys in my carpool, Tommy Sidlowski, goes, "Hey, 41 reopened in the Bronx because during the Koch administration, he closed it. And when Dinkins came in, because of so much pressure so much pressure in the community that they got it reopened when Dinkins came in to office. So they reopened it. They're going to open it as a squad. They had a whole bunch of guys that they had ready to go there. Some of the guys who, when they disbanded it, went to other companies. Some were stayed in the battalion, the 14th Battalion. Others went to Queens or Brooklyn or wherever. And only a few of them wanted to come back. So they came back with some other guys. And they kind of stepped on some toes. The Bronx is a pretty laid-back borough when it comes to fires and how you treat the brothers and who's first due, who's second due. Where in Brooklyn, one of our chauffeurs in 41, Tommy Haskell, used to say, "We challenge at intersections. You know, first one, it doesn't matter. I don't care if you're second or first due. We got here first. It's ours." So in the Bronx, like, "Oh, they're first due, let them go. You know, if you get there at the same time, I'll let them go." And another friend of mine who worked in 7 Engine with me, Billy Dietrich, when he became a captain, he went up to 83 Engine. He said, "Oh, it's different up here." He goes, you know, because he was a lieutenant in 112 in Brooklyn, and, you know, he's in 83 Engine now. And he's like, "Yeah, it's like gentlemen up there. Like, you know, you get to an intersection, no, after you. No, after you. No, after you." You know, it's a different mentality.
I've heard that. Kevin Kubler talks about that all the time. I get salty.
It's a different mentality than the, you know, Brooklyn Fire Department.
Yes.
So my friend tells me, he goes, you know, they had the guys, they go there and they're stirring up a lot of feathers with a lot of surrounding companies. They're showing up second due and third due with tools, and they're pissing off a lot of ghetto companies, and those guys are salty. So when you're second due and you're showing up with tools in an engine, when you're a second due engine on that box, they're like, "What are you doing?" You know, so they pissed a lot of people off. And it got to the point where I'm not really sure exactly what happened, and I don't want to guess or speculate or spread any rumor, but it wasn't working out for some people on both sides of the aisle. You know, the guys that wanted to be second and third due with tools, like Squad 1, or be an engine when it's supposed to be an engine. There was some in-house going on between the guys that were in original 41, and that has its own legend of history. So those guys end up leaving, and a lot of guys left. The original guys stayed because they wanted to be there, that had come back, and then they brought in Captain Ralph Tiso. Ralph Tiso was a job legend.
Yep.
I mean, he was in one of the TCUs during the war years that hung out at 82 and 31. They worked like, 4 to 12. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that was their, you know, peak fire duty. So He was a 45 engine guy, 58 truck guy. He was a Harlem guy. He knew all the chiefs, and they figured we need somebody to calm this down. So they brought in Ralph. He brought in his own guys, and he brought in a guy from 61 Engine who was one of my carpool guys, Tom Sidlowski. He goes over there, and he's telling me about it. He goes, Mike, Captain Tiesel's looking for guys. He wants guys from trucks. So I'm like, yeah. Because when I first heard about squads, when I was in 7 Engine, I said to Lieutenant Bono, Joe Bono, he was a 283 guy in the war years. He's like, hey, they're opening up a squad in the Bronx. You want to go? And I was like, what's a squad? I didn't know what a squad was. So he had squad 5, I think, during that time in his house, or a squad 2 maybe, because there was a squad 5 in 41. They had 41, 41-2, and squad 5 at one time. So there was so much fire duty up there. Each 41, 41-1, 41-2, each were doing 10,000 runs a year. Each. And basically, they were going to the same box. Like the first box came in, 41 went. Second box came in, 41 and 2 went. So 20,000 basically different runs out of that one firehouse. That's how busy it was down there. So I go up. He goes, the fire duty's unbelievable. We're going to Harlem. We're in the Bronx. He goes, the fire duty's ridiculous. So I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. So I go up, I call up the captain, make an interview with him. I sit down with him for like a half hour, 45 minutes. And, I told him a little bit of my experience, that I had on the job so far. I was already first grade at that point. And I was like, yeah, I want to go to more fires. And one thing Teddy Penfield from 7 Engine always told me, as soon as you can get out of here, if you want to go to fires, get out. Otherwise, you're just going to get used to it and you're going to stay here. Case in point, friend of mine, Steve Rogers, Ladder 1, still there. He got the idea before I did. He's still there. He likes it there. That was his whole routine. That's great. I love the house. I wish I could have just taken that whole house and the guys in it and move it up to like Harlem or something.
That's the highest praise you can give a company. That speaks volume to the type of company it is.
Oh, the guys were great. They were great. Everybody wanted to go to fires. It was great. So I interview with Captain Tisa. He goes, all right. He goes, I'm bringing up one guy now from Brooklyn, but, he's an EMT and I'll bring you up after him. I said, oh, you want to know about that kind of stuff? Because I only told them about our job. I said, oh, well, I was on the job in Florida for like 6 years and we did all this emergency work down there. Like I know the Hearst tool, every way to use it, back and forth, like the back of my hand. Hearst tool, airbags, all that stuff. I was an EMT down there. I got all this training, I got ROCO rescue training in Florida and they had us come back and teach the guys at Pinellas Park, the ROCO. And one day I'm out at the Rock and ROCO is training Rescue 1. And Tommy Baker is talking to the one guy from ROCO, was the guy from my department, Pete Huffman, who unfortunately has passed. We went together in Pinellas Park. He works for ROCO part-time. He's teaching Rescue 1. So me and Pete are talking, and Tommy goes, how do you know Pete? So we took ROCO back in 1985. We got certified to teach ROCO, back then. And he's looking like, ROCO? And because going to Rescue 1 wouldn't have been a bad thing for me either. I was eventually looking to go to a rescue. That was my end game someday. And I would have loved to have gone to Rescue 1. So I tell him I'm ROCO trained. I got all this other training. And like he puts down his pen, he sits back in the chair and goes, oh. So I'm telling him the different stories of the things that I had, different, car on the tractor trailers, this and that, getting them out, all different things. He's like, oh, okay. And he goes, I'm going to get you up here right away. What's your captain's name? It's just, so in a week I was up there and there was no looking back at that point because it was great. The guys I worked with in 41, we had such a tight knit group of guys. Paul Soman, who I think you know.
Yep.
Scotty Maxwell, John Citarella, Joe Gandiello. The list goes on, and their names are going to pop into my head more. And we were so close. Danny Sheridan. We were so close in age. We were all having kids at the same time, and they were all girls. Everybody was having a girl. There was like no boys in the mix anywhere of all these people. Yep, there's Danny Sheridan right there. We were all having girls, and there's still a bunch of us that still only have girls. But we were all around the same age, all had the same kind of interests. And it was like probably the closest group of guys that I had ever worked with, because we all had the same ideas. We all had the same mentality. We want to go to fires. We want to be the best we can. And we all started studying. And Joe came captain of Rescue 4 afterwards. He was lieutenant in 252. There were more guys from Squad 41 who got promoted and were working in SOC than any other SOC company in the command.
Really? That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Unbelievable. There's a picture from 1996. This is right before I went to Rescue 4. More guys that had worked in 41, because Solomon went to 2. He became a lieutenant. Mm-hmm. But there was and even guys that I took the 92 test because I was always reading. I mean, as a probie, I was reading. I was reading as a third grade, second grade, first. I was always reading because I wanted to know about these boxes. I wanted to know about, the different boxes all these companies went to. I wanted to know about the buildings. I wanted to know about everybody's position, because you don't want to show up and not know. Because once they had the citywide detailing, a manpower thing. Now you're going citywide. I got detailed to 113 truck one day, and I'm looking around saying, I read about some of these buildings, but I don't really know as much about it. And it's like, you got the OV. And I'm like, okay. And I'm looking around, and I go to the officer. I said, I worked in Lower Manhattan, and I got this from one of the guys who got promoted from Brooklyn. And I probably couldn't appreciate it at the time. But when I went to 113 to go to work one day, I did. He came into Manhattan because he'd never been in Manhattan, always a Brooklyn guy. And he said, listen, I don't know nothing about Manhattan. I don't know nothing about these high-rise, these Class E's. He goes, I follow you guys. You lead the way. You do what you do. Don't worry about me. So he followed us into these boxes, into these boxes, whatever. Oh, yeah, this is the Class 3, whatever, Class E, did whatever. And it took me a while to appreciate the fact that he wasn't coming in here. I know everything. I've worked in Brooklyn my whole career. I'm a lieutenant now. I know everything. I couldn't appreciate that more at the time. But as I worked more and more, I could appreciate it. So when you get to 41 and you see all these guys from different areas. Gandiello came from Brooklyn. Citarella came from Queens. Sheridan was in 17 truck. You had guys from all over the city coming up there. And it was a lot of fun because you got a lot of guys from different, guys from Brooklyn. These are the brownstones. I don't have any brownstones in Lower Manhattan. It's like reading about them and being in them are two different things. Until you can really appreciate how that lower level under the stairs or the window that's above the stairs you don't want to be in, or like the sub-basement or the sub-cellar in the brownstone, or row frames. We didn't have any row frames. So I'm looking around, and I go to the boss and said, I'm not that familiar with these buildings. I'm not really sure if you want to put me in the OV. I mean, I know I got to get to the back stuff, but I'm not familiar with how to get to the back of a lot of these. So he looked at me and he goes, okay, all right, you got the can. I mean, I wasn't trying to get the can, so I'm on the fire floor. But he was like, and that's where I appreciated this guy from Brooklyn telling me he's not familiar with it. And it wasn't something to be afraid of either, I didn't think. I thought it was actually pretty smart, because we go in there, we're following him, and we don't know. We don't know where the guy's been. He's covering for the day or if he's doing a vacation. You don't know. But anytime anybody ever said anything to me afterwards about, I'm not familiar with this, no problem. I would switch them around, do whatever. I want you to be comfortable in what you're doing. Don't come to me every time I give you a position and, a year later you're telling me you're not familiar with it, you want the can. It's not going to work that way.
Right.
But reading and actually being in them are two different things. So you hear the guys from Brooklyn talking about the brownstones, because we had brownstones in the Bronx over there. So we go over there and we take a look at them, we drill them. Captain Tiso would take us out to vacants in the tenements. Well, we had tenements. I've been to tenement fires. That was, that was okay. And vacants. There was still plenty of vacants down there in 91 when I got down there. And just go rip it apart. Plenty of fires in vacants. Every tour we go out and either cut holes in the roofs of the vacants or, taking down doors in the vacants. It was a lot of fun. And the group of guys made it even better. And a lot of guys getting promoted out of there. I mean, I looked at that list in 96. More than half the guys that are in that picture got promoted. And most of them were working in SOC at the same time as officers. So the fire duty in 41 was insane.
Oh, yeah. That's sounds about right.
When I got there, we must have been doing 12, 13, 1,400, 1075 and multiples a year.
Wow.
We didn't work at everyone. There was some smoke walking. All right, give me a secondary on the floor above, when we got there or something. Mm-hmm. Or it's like if it's ripping, you hear the chief on the radio. You got the squad coming into this box, right? Yeah, they're coming in. Then the officer would hear that and he goes, yeah, chief, we're pulling in right now. What do you need? I need you on the floor above right away. And get your outside team to the roof, and not to sit. And believe me, the ghetto companies, the South Bronx companies, the Harlem companies, they knew what they were doing. They were kicking ass. And it was great because you get to work with guys. And that was always one of the things I saw too, where, guys that know what they're doing, you're here to help them. You're not here to show them. You're not here to take over anything from them. These guys knew what they were doing. But if they needed more help, the squads and the rescues were like the linebackers and the free safeties for the chief. I can use these guys anywhere. With the chief's ace up his sleeve. All right, you know what? It's starting to communicate to the exposure. Get the squad in that building. How many times we did that? I mean, it just, the fire duty was incredible. I mean, I can probably count on both hands, or maybe my hands on my toes, how many times I went to work in 41, wearing a 24, you didn't go to a job. It was just insane. But by the time I got to, being there 3-4 years, it was like, all right, you know what? One of these days, I know I still want to go to rescue. And we were running with Rescue 3 all the time. But before I left Ladder 1, I interviewed at Rescue 3 because I was first grade at that point. And still at that point, first grade was acceptable. They didn't want guys who were second grade or third grade. If you're a first grade guy, you could go interview anywhere you wanted. So it was Jack Calderon was the captain of Rescue 3. And when they were still up in Washington Heights, I interviewed with him. And I'm sitting there talking and telling him, what it goes. Okay. And I said, oh, by the way, Chief, Cap, I was a fireman in Florida for 6 years and, very proficient with the tools and a lot of different things. And he's like, oh, yeah. He goes, where did you work? Now, Calderon is the big rig guy. I mean, he's written so many books about the rigs. I mean, there's nothing about rigs he don't know. Mm-hmm. I said, I was in the Pinellas Park Fire Department. And he sat there for a second, was quiet. And he goes, we sold you guys a rear mount Mac. Going back to the earlier story, when I got to the firehouse, there's the Mac sitting on the apparatus floor. I'm like, and the guys told me it was an old New York rig. And I was like, As a matter of fact, you're right. That was there. It wasn't working when I got there, but yes, that was it. I mean, the memory this guy had with the rigs and everything else, that the fire department sold it to a small city called Pinellas Park.
Is he still around, or Chief Calderon?
Yeah, he's around.
Okay. He'd be great to track down and get on the show. Before you continue, let me just shout out to a few guys before you continue. This is great so far. This is volume 55 of the Best of the Bravest. This Deliverance so far has been an awesome show. I mentioned John Costello, Lou Scalfani, I highlighted in the chat earlier, William Fisher, Mike Milner, of course, from Rescue 4, Nick Palumbo of the NJ Fire Guys podcast. You got to check out his show, too. He does a great job. He's off to a firing start with that, no pun intended. Christian Williams, George Trubig, as well as Steve Iarato and Maui Swift, also known as Nicole Wirch, out of Vancouver, Canada. So shout out to everybody tuning in tonight. But yeah, Calderon, my guy, when you mentioned that, it's amazing. And David Burns, YouTube via LinkedIn, it's amazing how much of this intersects. You said small world a few times during the podcast tonight, and it really is a small world.
I'm not done with the small world yet.
Yeah.
It still gets more to go. It still gets smaller.
Keep going. I'm loving this. Keep going.
So I get in 41. I'm having the time of my life. We're going to work, and here we go. Going to a job in the middle of the night, over in Harlem. And here it is, standing on the roof, another Harlem sunrise. I can't tell you how many Harlem sunrises we had over there. The work was incredible. It was so much. I had, in about an 8-month span, one of the brothers, I won't name, just came back from vacation. It was the summer. We get this job in an H-type, up around 49 Trucks area, somewhere up, maybe just a little north of them. So we get a job. I got the outside with the other guy. I'm carrying the rope and a hook. He's got the saw and the Halligan, and we take the stairs, 5th floor. We go up the A wing, fires in the B wing. Come out of the door. He got up there ahead of me. I come out of the door, walking across the throat, and always whenever I'm in an H-type, I'm always looking at the throat. Always looking into the throat, always overlooking the throat to see what's going on. Because the fire was more in the back of the building, but I always look over into the front. So I get out and I make my way over to the parapet wall of the throat, and I look over and I see this guy hanging out the window of the top floor, and smoke is coming out over his head. And I'm like, oh man. I run over to this other brother. I bang him on the shoulder. I say, we got a rope rescue. Let's go find something to tie off to. And he's just like, what? And I'm screaming, rope rescue, let's go. And I'm making my way to the front of the B wing, drop the rope, tying it around myself. I pull out my hook off my harness, getting clicked off and everything. And he comes over and goes, I can't find anything to tie off to. I'm like, tie off to yourself and get a couple other guys over here, because if you're going over on a rope, you'd rather have more than one guy on the rope. Right. Holding you, especially if that line's not tied off to anything. Mm-hmm. So, especially after you see what happened in Midtown.
You read my mind, because I was thinking that recently. That came in handy there with those rescues.
So I was like, grab a couple of those guys. But the problem is when you tell guys that there's a rope rescue going on. Now, they had a different situation because the corners of that building in Manhattan was so far over, you couldn't really look over to see anything. Patty Brown did, because he straddled the thing, because he's running the operation as the boss. So he had to. But other firemen didn't need to do that. They just need to stand behind the guy or get him on the ground and hold him down. So there were no other bosses up there. It was me and this other guy. And I said, go get these other guys. Get them over here. So a couple of guys come over, and I was like, we're a rope rescue. Let's go. And they turned into the squad. Uh-oh, what? And then they, come over to the parapet, and they start looking over like, they're sightseeing. I'm like, get on him. And by that time, a guy from the floor below goes up the front fire escape, goes into the window, grabs the guy, pulls him out to the fire escape. but that fire escape didn't have the gooseneck in the front. So there was no way we would have been able to go down to get the guy that way anyway. So at that point, get back to the firehouse. A couple guys were like, you couldn't get him something to tie off to grab this guy. So we had a good laugh with that. Another rope job, and this is where Paul Soman, after he heard the story, we pull up to this multiple in an H, and this thing, top floor, I mean, we're a block away where the rig is parked, and the flames are 30 feet over the roof. I mean, this thing is ripping. We grab our tools. We're on our way. I don't know if I had the saw or the rope that day. I think I had the saw. I had the saw that day. And as we're walking up, the chief tells Dennis Moranchak, God rest his soul, the 19 truck guy in the war years. I mean, this guy saw everything. The chief tells Dennis, I want you guys to help him stretch a line. And we're thinking, oh man, we want to go to war. We don't want to just stretch a line, so like, so I got the saw over my shoulder. I got the hook. I'm not letting this stuff go. I grab the line and we're humping it in. We get it into the lobby area and it's like, all right, they got enough now. Let's go. So I go up the B wing. I come out the bulkhead door, 5th story. I come out the door and there's the throat right in front of me. In the A wing, the fire is 30 feet in the air. It's unbelievable how much fire is coming out of there. There's a trench cut in the throat. There's a trench cut from one side of the A wing to the other side of the A wing. They cut another trench. They're already starting the 3rd trench in the back, toward the back of the A wing. I see a chief and an aide at the window. And my routine, I walk out of the bulkhead. I go to the throat. I'm looking. There's a fireman hanging out the window of the top floor. 30 feet of flame shooting out above his head. He's screaming, I'm trapped. I'm out of air. At that time, Ray Meisenheimer, one of the funniest guys you can meet, great guy.
Yeah.
From Rescue 3, is up there. He comes over. I see him over there, and I told the chief, I'm going for a rope rescue. I grab Ray, and now I learned from the first time when this unnamed member, when I told him what I needed, he didn't do it. So I grabbed Ray, and if you knew Ray was a giant. He was a big guy. I grabbed him by the coat and did not let him go. And I said, we got a rope rescue. And we knew each other, we knew each other. We worked together a lot. We knew each other. Ray, let's go. We got a rope rescue. And he keeps like, what? And I didn't let him go. And if I was to academy right now, I'd be teaching the guys the same thing. Grab the guy because everybody's going to want to look over and see what's going on. Grab him by his coat and drag him with you. If you saw what's going on and what needs to be done, grab his coat, drag him with you. We went over the one trench, made the left, went over the other trench that they cut, and now we're starting to really feel the heat because this thing is, I'm telling you, it's ripping out of there. One of the biggest holes I've ever seen cut in a tenement. And we make the left on the way to the front to get to the window, like the courtyard side window. Ray says to me, you want to lower me? And I was like, yeah, like I want to lower a Volkswagen because he was just so big. Because we made the turn. There's nothing to tie off to because it's all flames shooting out of the hole. So I drop the bag, take off my hook. I clip into the rope. He's putting on the ladder belt, and he gets on the ground, and he's putting his feet up against the parapet, and I'm straddling this thing. And then now, what else do I see when I'm straddling the parapet? The chief is over there screaming at the guy. He's screaming out, I'm coming down. I'll be right there. A truck company comes up, and they're at the throat, staring at me. Instead of like running over, they're like Like, what do you got? Cameras? You going to take pictures of this? Like, what are you doing? Come on.
Hi there.
I see these guys, and I'm like, I'm waving, get over here. I'm screaming at him, get on this guy. So I get over, and just as my foot's going over, the boss that was with him kicks my foot over the fire. I mean, I'm going over anyway, but he gives my foot a kick. I start going down, and just as I get to the window, the chief is screaming at me, we got him out already. We got him out. I'm thinking, how the hell did you get him out? I'm like, where the hell is he? The chief actually talked him to go follow the wall. He's out of air. I mean, the fire was there. I mean, he was really taking a beating. He goes, follow the wall to the right. When you get to the other wall, make a left, and there's a window out to the fire escape. So just as I got there, the guy just got out of the fire escape. So get back to the firehouse, and the change of tours. Paul Solomon comes in. He hears about it. He goes, two? You almost had 2 life-saving rope rescues? He goes, you go your whole career and never get one because you almost had 2? I'm like, yeah, but it's like, horseshoes and hand grenades. It doesn't count. But it was just those things that you pick up from the first time. The uh-oh squad. Like, everybody comes over, get over here. What? And this time, just grab them, bring them over. And as soon as and now they all had to pull me back up over the parapet. So they pull me back up, get over there, and we left the rope and got out of there because, I mean, that whole ceiling, the whole roof was collapsing and everything. I mean, that had a Gordon Bennett medal written all over just for Ray Meisenheimer for lowering me down. And he was, wasn't even 10 feet. Must have been 8 feet to the hole with the fire blowing out of it. So, I mean, that was one of the most precarious situations that way. So, again, a lot of fun in 41. We had that. I always thought that rescue companies, ever since the beginning, their job is, and I think I've heard Paul Hagen talk about this, great guy, another FDNY legend.
He's been on my show, yep.
Rescue was made to rescue firemen and do those jobs that nobody else can do because nobody else has the equipment. And that's what I had always envisioned in my head. I'm in 41. We're standing outside of a tenement, and it's a good job. The chief's getting ready to tell us what to do. I'm standing next to Bobby D'Elia, an original 41 guy. Did his whole career there, except when they closed it for that year. He went out to Queens, but he came right back because he knew that was where he belonged.
Right, that's where his heart was.
We're standing out there. The chief's giving the boss orders for us to go do something. And just out of the corner of my eye, the way I was positioned, I knew he was next to me, but I also heard when you lift up the ladder on the fire escape, you hear that hook swing away. Gets that creaky metal sound. And I was we were right in front of the building at the fire escape. And as soon as I heard that, I knew Bobby was to my left, and he was right under the drop ladder. And there was a civilian up there that was just opening it. And I grabbed him by the shoulder and pulled him away just in time because the ladder caught the side of his helmet and went off his shoulder. When that guy let that ladder go, if he wasn't moved, he'd been dead. It would have crushed him. I mean, it would have had brain damage at the least, but it would have killed him. Twice I had to do that, not to Bobby, but this other guy in, I think it was either a 71 engine or 55 truck. We went up as a squad over 92 and 44. They had a nice job in the tenement. And there's a guy from, I said, 71 or 55, standing in front of the building, and he's standing under the drop ladder. And I'm walking up to it, and there are people up there. And I don't know why the ladder wasn't already dropped by the second new company or whatever. But the ladder, the people on the fire escape, and I see the guy lifting the ladder, and I'm walking up, and there's a guy from that company standing under, and I grab him and move, and he's looking at me, and bam, comes out the drop ladder, because those things come down hard. The only thing holding them up is that hook. All the rest is gravity.
And if that goes, hey, look out.
And those things aren't light.
Mm-hmm.
So two guys that way. We had some fires in Harlem that we'd be going over to in the rig. And every time we'd be getting the first progress report sometimes from the boss or the battalion, we hear it, fire. And then we'd all look at each other, fire, top floor, rear. It was always the top floor and it was always in the rear. It seemed like all the time was top floor rears. You know, we made a joke out of it. It's like, what do you think? This will be a top floor rear job? You know, before we even got in the rig. But it was another job we had in Harlem. Fire in a tenement, whole bunch of tenements along 140 something street. We get there and the chief tells the boss to have his outside team go into the exposure to the top floor and check for extension. I don't remember who I was with. It might have been Aldo Adisi, who's now a chief in SOC. Mm-hmm. He was one of the probies, one of the three probies that Captain Tissot brought over to 41 because he told his good friend at the time, Chief of Department Fusco, he goes, Tony, I want 3 guys out of the academy. Oh, 3 guys going to a squad. He goes, I want to train them. And they turned out to be like 3 of the best guys. Larry Sullivan, Aldo Adisi, like I said, who's now chief in SOC, and Tommy Foley, who got killed in 9/11.
Yep.
Work with Tommy all the time. A couple of the pictures have Tommy in there with me.
Go through them right now, see what I can pull up.
Larry Sullivan might be in one of the pictures there with me.
Is he in this one?
No. It's Billy Walsh, John Citarella, Kevin McCardle, Richie Ting. Not sure who the boss was. He was a covering guy. But if I'm wearing that jacket, yeah, there's Tommy Foley on the right. Morgan Edwards, right. Bobby D'Elia, 41 legend right there in the middle. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of good guys came out of that company. A lot of good guys. Got so much good work, the experience, because fire duty was down in a lot of the city, but in some of the areas, the crack. It was what we call the crack years. Mm-hmm. Crack was whack. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, the fire duty was insane. I mean, you walk into some of these buildings, thousands of crack vials on the floor in the lobby. Thousands. I mean, it was just like ridiculous. Going up the stairs all over the place. So we got a lot of experience. I mean, when I heard my father talk about it, you know, after the riots and then the war years, we lived in Williston Park. Friends that I was with over there kind of buffed, and they had a scanner. And I said, "Oh, Dad, we got to get a scanner." So in the summer, we'd be sitting on the front porch of the house. We're sitting on the stoop, have the extension cord out there in the radio, you know, the scanner, and listening to the Bronx. And it was just like 1075. Oh, come and sit at 1075. It was like every night, especially on the weekends. 1075 is like crazy in the war years. I mean, I remember listening to it. It was great. And now I kind of understood, not to that extreme, but the crack years where I think were as close as you'll ever get to what the war years were. Because the South Bronx, Harlem, it was going. I mean, it was going.
That's a good comp. I would never think of it that way, but you know what? You're right, because from a different standpoint, both instances, hey, what's it doing to the city? It's ravaging and destroying parts of the city. It's reducing quality of life. It's stretching resources to the point of no return. So, you know what, even though for many guys have talked about it, both on this show and other shows, that's a good comp for you to act. That's the first time I actually had ever heard anybody make that comparison before. It's a good one. I can't say that enough. It's dead on.
I mean, even with this lithium ion battery thing that's going on.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think it's going to be anywhere near what the crack years were. I mean, they're getting them and they're bad, but not. I mean, even though they had 100, I think last year that
this is hazmat's war years.
Yeah, right. I mean, we go to 100 in a month, at least. You know, was it 100? No, 50, 60, 70. It depends. I had asked Sean Genovese, one of the 41 legends. We worked together in 41. He got promoted off the end of the 92 list. And when they made the squads, he went to 61 as a lieutenant. And he ended up coming back to 41. He ended up working as a lieutenant 41 for 17 years. So, he kept going. He goes, it's nothing like
circle.
Nothing like it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So the crack years were different. I had some kind of understanding now where my father used to tell the stories. He never used to come home and brag about it or anything like that, but he used to tell some stories, the little ones, like a simple room and content. He wouldn't talk about it, whatever. But there was one where 96 Engine made a grab because 54 was out somewhere. And I even have the article around here somewhere that him and his company, they stretched the line up to the apartment, but there were people trapped in it. So they went in, they made grabs. One guy got an A, a couple of guys, my father was one of them, got a B out of it, So there was, hearing the stories and then actually walking into these type of buildings and getting detail to 96 Engine from 41 once. And I'm like walking in quarters. I'm like, I remember being in these quarters as a kid, it brought back a lot of memories, and it really, it was really heartfelt walking in there. It's like, I'm working in 54 truck today, but my father worked in this engine company. He was in his firehouse, like I remember where his bed was from being 6 or 7 years old in the bunk room. I remember where his bunk was because he was in the same group the whole time he was there. So that was surreal, I guess. You took a little trek back in time, but it was a lot of fun at 41. I was talking about this job where the officer told us, I think it was Aldo, to get up and check for extension on the top floor. We get up to the top floor, banging on the apartment door, nobody answers. It was kind of middle of the night, banging on it, nobody comes. So we force the door, we go in, we go to the front of the building. So we go through kind of the living room, and the bedroom is in the front. We go into the bedroom. There's no lights on in the whole apartment. We got a flashlight, so we start poking some holes in the ceiling. And all of a sudden, I got somebody jumping on my back. And I'm like, what the hell? I turn around, and there's this naked woman jumping on me. And I was like, what? And I go pushing her off onto her. Like, what are you pushing off onto her bed? But she was just like a spider, like she just jumped right back on me again. And I'm like, what's going on? I said, lady, there's a fire. We got to, we're checking for extension. But, she's totally naked and just, jumping on me. And I'm like, you got to get out of here. You got to get out of here. So finally, I guess after the third time, I pushed her back on the bed, to get her off of me. She grabs the blanket and then runs out or something. I think maybe she thought she was getting robbed or something. I don't know. But that's one of those you never forget.
I'll say.
You never forget some naked woman jumping on you in the middle of the night. But 41, best guys I worked with. You go, you take some time at night to lay in the rack for a little bit before you go out again. Gunshots. Almost every night you hear in the South Bronx. You're like, is that a fire? No, that was a gunshot. So, well, I'm in 41. I think it was in 96. Yeah, it was 96. The FEMA team, which I was part of at that point, they did a training. Like after the bombing in Oklahoma, they really, Ray Downey, God rest his soul. That man was my mentor from day one. I met him.
Awesome guy. Legend.
The legend.
The capital L.
Absolutely. I have more respect for that man than I think anybody else on the planet, maybe except my parents. But he was it. They called him God.
Yeah. Never to his face, though. Always behind his back.
Always behind his back. Or if somebody said, yeah, with a little G. Not a big G, a little G. We're at his because we're talking about Ray, we're at his memorial service, and his son Joe is giving, part of the eulogy, and me and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, Jimmy McQuaid from SOC, was sitting next to each other. And Joe gets up there, so talking about his dad. And he goes, yeah, a lot of people used to call him God. And, and everybody kind of giggled because everybody called him God. And he goes, but most people didn't know his mother and father's name was Mary and Joseph. And me and Jim looked at each other like, are you freaking kidding me? So it was like, he was also, the Dutch story was a funny story. That's not my story to tell, really, but Mike has.
I got to jump in really quick because you mentioned the Downey sons, and it brings up a great story. I don't know if it was Joe or Chuck and Mike Milner, and one of the guys could put it in the chat. But when one of them got to a new company, they kept calling one of the kids Jesus. And finally he says, okay, why the heck are you calling me Jesus? I can't remember which son it was. He's like, one of the guys says to him, well, you're the son of God, aren't you? I never forgot that story.
I know both Joe and Chuck. Me and Chuck worked together in Rescue 4. I don't remember hearing that story, but I'll find out and I'll text you.
All right, please do, because I can't remember where I heard that from, but that story's always stuck in my head. It's so funny. So
after Oklahoma, they figured, he really organized. I mean, he made FEMA.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, he did.
He got guys from the SOC companies together and started that's the deployment that we went on to the 96 Olympics. And that in itself is its own story.
Mm-hmm.
The 96 Olympics, they had 3 teams for a week at a time in Atlanta. And they put us out at some campground miles away from downtown. And they had asked for guys to volunteer, or they selected guys to go. And one guy in 41 was selected to go, but he couldn't. So Jack Spillane, who became a rescue battalion chief, great guy, loved the guy. He said, Mike, you want to go? I said, I'd love to go. So did the whole thing. I mean, I was going over to where we had the cache all stored, and always going through equipment and always doing whatever I could, during FEMA training or whatever. And we got deployed. We got on I was going to ask Aldo this because he's a Air Reserve guy, been there 30 years now. We flew on one of the Air Force military jets that took a cache and the whole team down there. And we get down there, we're all set up. And what some of the other teams did before they left, because we relieved, I think, the Phoenix team, there were tents that we were sleeping in. This is Atlanta in the city, in the South, in the summer, at the end of July. So it's not cool by any means.
It's definitely not.
This is hot. So we're in tents, and then I guess they figured they would put a tent over the tent, or like at least a covering over the tent, so that would at least relieve some of the heat penetrating the tent. They had portable air conditioners, like 4 portable air conditioners in each tent. During the day, it was still hot. You didn't even want to be in there, even with the air conditioning. But at night, it was freezing. So the team that was leaving labeled each tent. We had 4 tents: Brooklyn, Bronx, Queens, Manhattan. And then, I don't know why they did this, but they made the Porta-John Staten Island. I'm not really sure why they did that. I still haven't figured that out yet. So, get down there. The team we're relieving goes, what they're going to do is they're going to have an emergency drill in the middle of the night. It's not going to be tonight. They never do it on the first night, but second, third, fourth night, they can do an emergency drill. See how fast you guys get ready to deploy. So we just got there on a Friday. We get all settled in. Like the next day, we're going to break open our cache and get everything, broken down a little bit. So if something needs, we can go out right away. but there's 2 teams ahead of us, so we're third in line. So that night we go to sleep, and then Downey banging on the tent door, opens up, turns on the lights. Let's go. There's been a bombing in downtown Atlanta. And we're thinking, come on. They said they weren't going to do this the first night. What are they doing? So I get up and I go to the outhouse, and, all of a sudden I hear helicopters flying in, because that's how we would get from this campsite that we were at to Atlanta if something happened during the Olympics. They were flying us in on Black Hawk helicopters, and the tractor trailers were going to drive our equipment in. So I'm looking up, I'm like, helicopters? No, they're not going to do this for a drill. So there was a media tent. We go to the media tent, the TV's on, it's on the news, explosion downtown. I'm like, oh, geez, I guess that's when they had that, the bomber at Olympic Park. There was a band playing, people were dancing, partying, having a good time in the official at Olympic Park down there. And then they end up making that movie after that guy, who
Richard Jewell.
Richard Jewell. They thought he
wasn't a bomber. Yeah,
he wasn't the guy. I mean, I watched that movie. I was down there. I felt so bad for that guy. It was just, and then he ends up dying like a year or 2 later or something. After
he died in 07 of like a heart attack. He had some health problems, and by all accounts, he was a sweet guy. Yeah,
but no, they pegged him as the guy. But we got there that morning, and that night that happened. So like, what is Downey bringing this stuff with him? Like, what's going on? So, and all we did was train. We trained with all the teams that were there. The teams that were coming in, relieving the other teams that were leaving. We got the helicopter training where everybody was in their groups, in their teams. Dennis Mojica was my team leader. A couple of issue cops. I don't remember who the other fireman was with me, and we had a medic. So we had our team. Everybody's all lining up. We got our packs on. And they bring in the helicopters to take us, and like, this is where we're going to bring you to Atlanta and drop you off. But they never got us that far. They brought us back sooner. But like, one of the highlights of your career, when you get to drive around in a Black Hawk helicopter,
doesn't get much better than that.
The Air Force jet, it was a lot of fun. So we're doing a lot of training. One of the guys that came with us, Tiso, was down there. He was the captain of Rescue 3 at that point. Captain Jack Corcoran, the captain of Rescue 4. Richie Euler, one of the senior men in Rescue 4. Great guy. I mean, he knows his stuff. We used to break his chops, but he really knew what he was doing. And we used to call him Sarge, because he was the guy. I mean, he would take control. And even Freddie LaFamina said to Richie, if I ever get killed on this job, I want you running my funeral. Because that's how squared away Richie was, and Richie's a good friend, and I care about him dearly. He had said to me when he goes, you kind of know your stuff. Would you be interested in coming to a rescue? I'm like, I'd love to come to a rescue, So I'm in 41 for 5 years now. Got a lot of fire duty behind me. We did a lot of emergency work. We did collapse stuff. We did trench stuff. We did high angle stuff. And we trained constantly. I mean, we had the airbag in our firehouse. We'd rip it out, start repelling, and do whatever we do. So I was up on everything, and I couldn't get enough of it. So where can you get more of that? In a rescue company. So I think the next day, Jack Corcoran says to me, Captain Corcoran, became a chief, God rest his soul, nicest man in the world. What a gentleman. He goes to me, got a minute? We're in downtime, whatever. I said, sure, Cap, what's up? I want to talk to you. Takes me over to a picnic bench, and he goes, how'd you feel about coming to Rescue 4? And I was kind of like, wow. I'd love to come to Rescue 4, Cap. I'd love to work for you. I mean, I'd seen him down there. And I had known him before, because when we were 41 and before they had the rescue battalion, they had the rescue liaison, which had an aide, and 3 captains who were either in rescues or busy companies. And Jack Corcoran was a fireman in 50 engine, 19 truck in the war years, 26 truck as a lieutenant. So they brought him over there, and I met him over there. And what a gentleman. Oh, man. Nicest guy in the world. I mean, he reminded me a lot of my father, and they worked together a lot. I mean, they ran into each other a lot because my father actually said he knew of him. So but even looking at him, he reminded me of my dad. So I'd love to. He goes, all right, when we get back, I'll do the paperwork. I said, I got to let Captain Spillane know, my captain of 41, I got to let him know, because when Tiso became the captain of Rescue 3, I don't remember who it was that actually asked Spillane, who was covering an Engine 61 at the time, if he wanted to come to the squad. The Spillane, he was a lieutenant, I think, in the 80 engine, and he was full of fire duty. So we couldn't ask for a nicer guy to come over there and take Tiso's place. He got the place so squared away. I mean, Tiso got guys there, but Spillane squared the place away.
Mm-hmm.
So
he's a parajumper, wasn't he, Spillane?
No, wrong one.
Oh, different. Oh, okay, different Spillane.
Yeah, no, different one. Rescue 4 was just moving to engine 292 in Astoria, 262, because 136 truck and 287 engine were getting their apparatus floor done. So, yeah, that's the new rig that they have now.
It's a nice looking one.
Yeah, that's the new one. The seats are back in the back. The one that's on the background had the crew cab in the back. That was my second rig. The first rig was the other, I think it was Seagrave, Salisbury Mac.
Let me find a picture of it on the internet.
The bench in the back also.
See if I can find a picture of it. I'm sure I can.
Only had that one for a year or two. Then this one was the one we had. We moved over there, and a couple of the officers were like, "This is ridiculous. What are we doing?" Like, talking about putting you in one end of the borough compared to the whole borough itself. Yep, that's the one. That's the one I started in.
Classic. Yeah,
classic for sure. Some of the other guys who were on before me who had that Bulldog Mac said they liked that one better. I'd actually been in that one because it was Rescue 3's collapse rig at one point. And I was like, man, why would they want to be in this? I mean, it was... I'm surprised the guys had that many kids. You got rocked around so much in that thing. But we went to 262, and every run now, especially down in Jamaica, every run was a ride. It's basically going from the Triborough Bridge to everywhere in the borough. So we did in the first. We were only there for a year, but during that year, 262. They were like, oh, Rescue's going to come in here. These guys, chips on their shoulder, the whole 9 yards. And we got there. They were like, we're going to do the house watch, whatever. We got it. And we're like, no. We're in here. We got the house watch too. You got 1 month. We got 1 month. We're not going to play that game. We're like, we think we're something else. Yeah, it's your house. We guess, but we got it. We're not going to do that. And after a couple of months, a couple of guys, Paulie Root was one of them. He's like, you guys are all right. The rumors we heard about you guys, they're not true. So
good to know.
They were good guys. They were such good guys. And they had guys going through the rotation that came through there. And there were good guys. Curly, he was in 174. He got killed in that one job in, I think it was Starrett City. What a good kid. And they had good guys in that company. And they had more fire duty because Paulie Root was one of the guys who was there, one of the longest. Like toward the end of our year there, he said, we had more fire duty in this last year than we've probably had in the last 5 years combined since you've been here. For whatever reason, Astoria, Long Island City started burning at that time. Couple blocks down from the firehouse, we get a run. We end up being first due 116 was the first due truck, but we got there before them. I had the can. Freddie Lafamina was the boss. Dan Hagelin, rest his soul, was the chauffeur. And the outside guys were doing their thing. And this fire, smoke is blowing up. Yep, there's Freddie Lafamina. We both got deployed to the Olympics together. And the smoke is pumping out the windows. So we get in the lobby. I can't remember who was with me with the irons, but we popped the door, and the fire's in the living room. It's going pretty good. But then the bedroom's back, and they got a report on the radio. Somebody's behind the window bars trying to get out of the first floor. So Freddie's like, Mike, go get that with the can. And him and whoever was on the irons went to the bedroom. But by the time they get into the bedroom, got to the window, Dan Hagelin, I think with the Harris tool, Glenn Harris, one of my lieutenants in Rescue 4. I love the guy. He might not be loved by a lot of people, but I love the guy. And the toughest fireman I've ever seen in my life. If you're trapped, call him up at home and get him in here. He's the guy I want to come get me. So he had always made the Harris tool. It was a 5-foot Halligan. Everybody's like, who's carrying this thing? We started carrying it. Like he ended up taking a smaller tool, but Dan Hagelin took the 5-foot Harris tool and knocked those window bars off the window. He had so much leverage with that he was able to pull the bolts out of the wall with like no problem. And he ends up pulling the woman and the kid out of the window just as Freddie and whoever the irons was there. So I'm knocking down the Christmas tree, the couch, the furniture, everything that's burning in there. And then the engine brings in the line. And by that time I'm out of the can, and it's bearable at that point. So we all come out, and the chief's like, we should write you guys up. And Freddie's like, no, chief, don't write us up. We don't have to be written up for that. So, and he was right. I mean, it wasn't that big of a deal. He was right. Some guys like, I think you should have wrote up. No, that was fine. We had another job when we got back to 292's quarters on Queens Boulevard, our quarters. First due 292, we're first due with them. On the other side of Queens Boulevard, and maybe 68th Street or 69th or somewhere over there, very close. We get in, fire's blowing out the windows, and the truck's not in. I think it's 136 that's supposed to come in. And 130, they're not there yet. So fire's blowing out the window. Louis Guzzo, a Williston Park guy. He's lieutenant in 292. Those guys stretch. I go in there with them. I believe I had the irons. Door was open. We go in. We go upstairs. And I do a quick search because the fire is contained to like the front of the house. Do a quick search, and they get the line up there. And as I'm done with the search in the back of the place that I could search, he comes up with the line. So, "Hi, Louis, it's this way." I grab him by by his coat. I don't rip him over, just like ease him over with me, like this way. Let's go this way. I just got into the habit of grabbing guys by their coat and just bringing them with me. They don't have to figure out where they have to go. I don't have to try to explain to them where to go. And, guys don't take it personal. It's just like, come with me, brother, let's go. So we get into like a front room, and it's banked down. You can tell the fire's in a room to the left because that's where it was blowing out the two windows. So it's banked down. We get into that room, and the guys are on their hands and knees now. We get to the door, and now fire's licking out of the room like crazy. And there was actually two rooms back there. And I said, Louis, now would be a good time to open the nozzle. So he's like, all right, open the nozzle. Because they're down on their knees, and they don't know what's blowing out over our head because I'm standing up. So, now would be a good time to open the nozzle. So they knock it down. They get it all. I get a quick search in there. Nobody's in there. And after the job is over, Louis comes up and he goes, I didn't see any fire blowing out of there. I said, yeah, you guys are down on the ground. It was blowing out. I mean, I was losing hair. So not that was much of a problem at that point, but he goes, but I always loved that. I always loved when, the heat is on. I could have used another word. When the heat's on, somebody makes a comment like that, you can open the nozzle now. It would be nice to open the nozzle now. It's just something.
It'd be a prudent strategy.
Yeah, just make it lighthearted. Like, come on, you got to open it. We'll burn it. It would be nice to open the nozzle now. So there was another job in Astoria, but we were back in 292's quarters, our quarters. The fire in Astoria. We were out on a drill, and nobody's dressed. We're in this rig that's behind us, and we get a call for a box that, private dwelling, attached private dwelling. So we're already out. We're like 3/4 of the way there already for where we were going. So we pulled in behind the first engine, which I think might have been 263, and there was no truck in sight. So we pull up down the block because Ralph Williams, I believe, was the chauffeur. Yeah, it was Ralph. Great guy. Pull up on the corner, away from the job, because he wants to leave room for the truck to get in there. He's doing the right thing. And I get out of the rig. I'm dressed now because I got the chance to get dressed. The captain didn't. I get out of the rig. I look back, and he looks over at me as he's starting to put on his boots. He's like, go ahead. Go down the block. They're stretching the line. I get upstairs. They got the line to the door. I get inside. I find the fire, do a quick search. I don't know what the officer of the company's doing, but the guys are standing there with a charge line at the door. And I'm like, you guys coming in? Again, try to make it lighthearted, just take it easy. You guys coming in? Oh, the boss is putting up. Let's go. The boss can catch up to us. So I grab the guy, don't let go of him, bring him in through the hallway, through the kitchen, around to the room that's going. Again, grabbing him, don't let him go. I said, here you go. Knock yourself out. And like, I can open it. I said, yeah, open the line up. The officer never showed up until they put the room out. So I don't know if it was a cover guy. I don't know what the deal was, but just those little things. Again, we grab the guy by the collar and you go. So there's another job. There's 2 more jobs I will tell you about on this one. This one job, we get a guy from 174 truck. 176, I'm sorry, 176, Mike Travis. Great guy, funny guy, tough find.
Tin House?
Travis.
So I'm saying the house. Is that the Tin House 176 or am I thinking of another house? Okay.
No, yeah, that's the one.
All right.
He comes over to Rescue 4. And again, I like lighthearted things. I'm not really like one of these loud, outspoken guys. Like this, blah, blah, I'm not like that. And he kind of saw me as that way. But we had a job down toward where his old company was, where that part of Brooklyn meets Queens. I'm not really positive what area that was, but it's not like a busy area for Queens companies. 176, they do their work, and they're a ghetto company, so they were there. We get there. It's a really good job on the upper floors of maybe a tenement, but the stairs are burned out. So me and Mike go upstairs with the company, and they're bringing another line up now because the fire's on the floor above now. So they bring the line around the stairs, but the stairs going up now are gone. So, I call on the radio. We need like a 12-foot ladder in here, straight ladder, because we got to use the ladder as the stairs. So they start bringing it up, and like they're hemming and hawing, bringing the thing up, and like the thing's really starting to go. And it's like Mike Travis is standing there, and he's new to the company. And then I see the guys, and I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't come up with a joke or anything like that. Like, okay, speed up a little bit. I mean, it's starting to go. So I grab the ladder out of their hands, bring it over, and throw it over on top of where the stairs used to be. And the guys with the line start going up the ladder, do what they got to do. We follow them up, make sure there's nobody up there. They put it out, come back down. And we get back to the firehouse. And Mike Travis is like, you were probably, I couldn't make you out. You're a quiet guy around the firehouse. You don't really, say a whole lot, but you just like ripped the ladder out of their hands. And he was like, I was kind of impressed. I really didn't know what to expect, but I was like, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And this other fire we had, Larry Gray was my boss. I had Larry Gray, Freddie LaFemina, Glenn Harris, and Jack Corcoran. Those are my bosses when I got there. I love working with every single one of those guys. Larry Gray is a legend, a Rescue 2 legend. Brooklyn. The guy, again, one of the nicest guys in the world you want to meet. We get a job over toward like the tunnel, the Queens Midtown Tunnel, in a it was a non-fireproof building. Like a 5 or 6, 7-story building, maybe non-fireproof. They get a 1075. I got the irons. I'm with Larry Gray. And we go to the fire floor because that's where the officer goes. And the irons and the can, we want to make sure that we get the rest of the floor. As we get up to the floor, they're dragging an old lady out of the apartment. And they just lay her on the floor in the hallway. I believe she was DOA at that point. But there were some other guys coming up behind us to grab her. And it was a pretty good fire going in the apartment. So Lieutenant Gray goes to me, let's check this apartment. Put the Halligan in the door jamb, give it a crack, thick black smoke around the door jamb, because when I popped it, the chain was on. So I popped it enough that it opened up, I guess, about that far for the chain, as far as the chain was, and the thick black smoke started pumping out of there. We turned and looked at each other. We were like, holy, because we weren't expecting that. Right. It actually made it through the walls of the apartment to the other apartment. Yeah. It made it through. So what's a chain on the door mean? Somebody's inside, because the chain don't lock itself if you're not inside. So when we saw that, we stared at each other and we're like, oh, we both threw our masks on, broke open the door. He takes off one way, I take off another. We're doing searches in there. He made his way to the right. I made my way toward the left. I got the living room, the couch, nobody there. I made my way to the bedroom. I opened the door. There's no smoke in the bedroom whatsoever. The whole rest of the apartment's charged, and the kitchen's kind of going. And, I think before we went in, Larry Gray said, yeah, we need another line in here. I opened the door, and there's the guys that I think in 163 maybe, with the bucket at the window, taking 2 people out. And we're like, oh, there we go. Just as we made it in there, they're getting them out the window. But just that whole look on Larry Gray's face, and we're just like, because he saw the chain, and chain means somebody's in there. So fortunately, those people didn't, but unfortunately, the one woman had passed away. Yeah. And when I say things come full circle, a lot of times, I want to be in a rescue company because I know rescue companies rescue guys. They rescue firemen. We had a job in Jamaica. In a private dwelling, basement fire. I got the can, so I'm supposed to follow the line. I go in the side door. I go down the basement stairs. Banked down to the floor, hot, but it's supercharged. Very hot, good fire going in the other corner of the basement. It was a pretty decent-sized private dwelling. All of a sudden, this guy grabs me. I'm out of air. Who is this? It's rescue, get me out of here. And I was like, all right, take it easy. Grab him, don't let him go again. That's my thing. I don't let anybody go anymore. Grab him by the coat. Come on, man, get me out of here. I said, just follow me, man. I'll get you out of here. I get him to the bottom of the stairs. I'm like, you're at the stairs. It's like, and he's like standing there. It's like, dude, I'm not going to carry you up the stairs. Just go up the stairs. You're talking to me. You're walking next to me. Go up the stairs. So I never saw anybody go up the stairs faster. I mean, he must have took some feed down there. But rescue and firemen, there's no more satisfaction out of that. Sure, you rescue civilians and everything. That's what your job is. But when you can rescue one of your brothers, or you can help one of your brothers out of a serious jam, I mean, look what happened with, the captain in who was working in 173, who died in the basement. He got overcome. And then guys couldn't get him out, and Rescue 4 ended up getting the guy out. Eddie Zielman, and I don't remember who else it was, but I know
they were Vinny Fowler.
Yeah, Vinny Fowler.
In 99, yeah.
Yeah, he got him out. So, Zielman and the other guy, I mean, because Vinny Fowler was a big guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was a big boy.
Sure
and
was.
Again, another full circle comes down to Vinny Fowler in 173. So, being in a rescue, there's a high-angle rescue with me, Liam Flaherty, and Chuck Downey. Me, Liam are overlooking the parapet with Chuck's on the rope. We lowered him down to bring up this guy. I don't think he eventually made it, but I think he was still alive when we sent Chuck down there to get him. And, the different aspects of everything. The high-angle stuff I loved. We did the training over at the Con Edison plant in Astoria. All the way up to the top of the smokestacks and just start rappelling down. I love that stuff. Maybe that was from watching Emergency when I was a little kid. Who knows? But there was another fireman in Far Rockaway. By the time we got down there, some guy, one of the brothers, I think, had a heart attack. We just got there, and we get in. I get in the front door, going up the stairs, and they're like, "Mayday, one of the members down." I'm tearing up the stairs. Just to get to the top of the stairs, they grab them, they drag them right to the top of the stairs. And I was in a position where my shoulder was like almost level with the floor of the second floor. So when they dragged him over there, I was able to get the guy, like just slide him out onto my shoulder. And there was a guy right after me where I had the guy, like the torso of the guy, and he had his feet. And we just like carried him right out, put him on the stretcher, and EMS got him out. It's just being in the right place at the right time, for these things to make sure, the brothers go home safe and that they go home. Rescue got a bad rap for a long time because, some guys with experience, especially in ghettos, like, oh, what are these guys? What are these guys? The rescues are, they're the chief's secret weapon. They can use it for anything, just like the squads now, They can use it for anything. So it's nice having that in your back pocket, especially if you're a chief standing in front of something and something starts to go sideways. The last fireman rescue story I'll tell you about was a friend of mine who was killed on Father's Day, Brian Fahey. Mm-hmm. We had this job in Astoria, and it was a good job. First floor, I mean, took the stairs. It was ripping. It was exposing into apartments on the floors above. So me and the outside guy, Rick Janowitz, we go up the fire escape. We get into an apartment above, do searches. We get into the hallway to force another door to do a search in another one. And all of a sudden we hear this crash, bang. And all of a sudden you hear guys screaming, "Help!" Brian Fahey. He had the roof. He was coming down. And in these old tenements, they have the squares on the landings, the marble squares that only have reinforcement on the outside edges. And over time, they tend to weaken. And Brian wasn't a little guy. Brian was a little on the girthier side. And he stepped on that thing. And maybe because of the heat from below, too, I can't blame it all on Brian, he went through it. And fortunately enough for him, I guess he had a hand on the newel post when he was going around, that he was able to wrap his arms around that newel post. And all you could see from the landing below where me and Rick were was his head and his arms at the stairs where the tread used to be, the landing. So like, holy crap, we didn't even have time to say there was a brother in trouble. We just ran up the stairs, and pulling this guy out of a hole was not the easiest thing in the world. Like, Rick, you got to help with this, man. I mean, I was like, Brian, we got you. We grabbed his mask so he wasn't going anywhere. He was strapped in good. So you're not going anywhere. And it took every bit of what we had to get Brian out of this hole, to get him onto the stairs. Because you basically reaching over. I mean, if you're level with somebody, it's not a great vantage point. But if you're bent over and pulling a guy up, it's even worse. So we finally got him up and over. A couple of days later, I come back to the firehouse. Mike Travis is like, I thought you said the fire was no big deal. I said, yeah, it wasn't that big deal of fire. He's like, that thing was awesome. I go, what are you kidding me? He goes, that thing ripped like half the building. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I said, I'm low key. I don't know what to tell you. But time comes for take the test, get promoted. I get promoted out of Rescue 4. I go to the Rock for flips training. Unfortunately, like 2 days before flips is over, my father passes away. And at least, I got promoted. My father passes away, and I can't go to the last 2 days of flips, which was class E's and working the workings of sprinkler systems in high-rise buildings. And I told the one captain, I'm like, if you want me to come back and do this, I will. But I did work in Lower Manhattan for 4 years. And he goes,
you're pretty familiar.
The chief of flips is just like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. He goes, you probably know more than these guys are going to know coming out of there. Don't worry about it. But he goes, you're going to have to go back and take the final. So I'm like, all right. So I get back from my father. I'm assigned to, and I called Jack Corcoran. Now he's a chief. I call him and I say, I'd like to go to the 13th Division. If there's any way you can help me out, I'd appreciate it. I probably told Freddie the same thing. So I ended up getting assigned to the 13th Division, which is, South Queens. At that time, I was like ready for a little easier commute, just, take a break, get into the new position as a boss. And being in rescue and being in the squad that did so much fire duty, I think helped me exponentially in becoming a boss. Not only from studying and taking the test and passing and getting promoted, but you got to see, especially if you had the can of the irons, you're in there with the boss of the first due engine or truck. You're in there. You're seeing it. You're seeing what they're doing. You're seeing what they're saying. You're seeing how they're, teaching their guys. You see all that stuff that's going on. At an officer standpoint, it was like almost being a chief's aide, being right behind these guys the whole time. So you got a lot of experience with that. And I think that helped me. So I got assigned to the 4-7 Battalion in the 13th Division, which is the Rockaways, but you're pretty much in the whole division. So it didn't really make a difference. When I was in Ladder 1, I worked with such great guys. Tommy Ryan, funniest guy on the planet. You'd never meet a funnier guy than Tom Ryan. 6'5", 250, 60, whatever he was. He did like body work on the side on cars. His finger was like a piece of rebar. He'd come up to you and like in your chest, hey, do you know? And like he'd break a rib with his finger in your chest. Joking around with, did you hear this? My first job as a boss, ladder 155, I walk in, Tommy Ryan's the chauffeur. We're out on BI. We're sitting out there, me and him in the rig, and a box comes over for 155, report a fire in a private dwelling. And he hears the address, and he turns and looks past me and goes, it's over there. Like across the lake from where we were. He goes, it's over there. And so the guys come running out, and we start pulling out, turn the corner, and there's a bunch of smoke. But it's not like real smoke. I mean, I've seen a lot of guys give 1075s for guys standing on the floor. There's so much dust coming out of a window. Guys are giving 1075s for it. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm waiting until I see what's going on first. So we pull around the corner, and he reaches over with that finger and is poking me in the shoulder. We got a job. I'm like, all right, hold on. We finally pull around the corner, pull up, fire's blowing out the top floor of the PD, second floor of the PD. So I give the 1075 and, give the whole size up, the whole 9 yards. Guys in 155 did a great job. I mean, the ladder into place, they're going in with the can, we're going in, I mean, doing searches. People are starting to coming down. They're coming down from the second floors. We're making it in there. I mean, I don't know why they were in there as long as they were, especially if they were that mobile. They're coming in. We get up to the third floor and try to do as quick a search as we can because it's ripping. Can't get in too far. The can doesn't help too much. They come in with the line, and then we're right behind them, following them in. Nobody else is in there. But I hear on the radio the chief telling the senior officer on the scene to take command because he's far away. Like he's at the division or something. He's going to be a while. And it turns out he was the captain of 270 that day, was Steve Spall, who ended up being my captain in Squad 61. So he was the captain. I'd known him because he covered when I was in 41 a lot. And when I was in 4, he'd come in there a lot. So we knew each other. He was the chief on the scene before the chief showed up. So he assumed command of the whole thing. And then when he got there, he was just like, like give me the nod, like, nice job, nice size up. The guys at 155 did a great job. 303 did a great, 302 did a great job. It was good, clockwork. Everything worked like it should have. So having my first job with the chauffeur that I used to work with, Low Manhattan, how things come full circle. I go to work at 127, 165. I go into 127. We get work every time I go there. They're like, oh, Lieutenant Roy's working tonight. I'm going to work tonight. So it was a lot of fun. Did some vacations in a bunch of spots. Had a good time. Worked a job at 165. We're out on multi-unit drill. Did a report of a fire in a private dwelling. The chauffeur says, Lou, we're going to be there first. We're already out. We're closer than whatever company's coming in second. We're going to be first too. Let's pull up, fire blowing out the basement, smoke everywhere. Give the 1075 the size up. I go in the house. I tell the engine to bring the line inside. Bring it in. I mean, this basement's ripping. Bring it in because we're going to lose this house. And all of a sudden you hear on the radio, no, bring the line to the side door. And I'm like, who's giving that order? So I'm not worrying about that at that time. So I go out, I close the door that came up to the kitchen. I go out, come around the side door, fire's blowing out, they're hitting it down there. And then they start going down. So we start going down behind them. But before we start going down behind them, the kitchen's going now because it burned through the door. And now the kitchen's going. So I'm like, all right. So I said, bring a second line into the house because you're going to need to do the kitchen. So after the job is over, the chauffeur comes up to me. Lou, I'm sorry. He goes, that was me who told him to bring the line to the side door. They should have brought it inside. I'm sorry. I was like, all right, these things happen, whatever. The guy fessed up to it, whatever.
Yeah.
Doing that. But, and it wasn't much long after that, I'm bouncing around, and then 9/11 happens. And 9/11, I wake up, take my kids to the bus stop. Me and my wife, after that, we go to the gym. So we're standing at the bus stop, and I get a phone call from my brother. Open up the cell. No, what's up? Hey, did you see some guy flew into the World Trade Center? I'm like, what are you talking about? I look outside. I'm like, It's a beautiful day. How the hell did he miss it? Like, how could you not see this building?
Exactly.
So I turn the radio on in the car, and I'm listening to FAN or CBS or what, not FAN, 1010 Wins or CBS, and I'm listening, and they're like, planes crashed into the World Trade Center. I'm thinking, all right, it's, a small plane, like a Corey Lytle kind of plane.
Yeah.
Thinking, okay, it's that or whatever. The company's going to handle it, no big deal. Then I hear some guys, oh, another plane has hit the towers. And I'm like, all right, they're talking to some nut on the phone, at the scene. So I turn the radio off. The bus takes the kids to school. I get in the car with the wife, and we drive to the gym. I walk in, and everybody at the gym staring at the TV. And I'm like, okay, we got to go. So we got back in the car, drove home, grabbed some clothes, and I start driving in. Traffic's starting to build up a little bit as you get more toward the Queens line from the island, because Nassau cops have got it closed off. They don't let anybody in. So I'm racing in there, and you see guys passing me, and they're either cops or firemen that are racing in. I'm driving in a minivan. I can only go so fast. So I'm going, and I get toward that, like, roadblock, and I'm like, screw it. I get into the median, and I'm knocking those barrels off the median in front of me as I'm going up, and I pull up in front of the cop and show him my badge. He's like, see you. And like 10 cars behind me that will follow me doing that, all firemen and cops. I start going, and they start flying past me. And I get a phone call from, I was told to report to Cunningham Park. I get a phone call from SOC, report to SOC. I report there. Jack Spillane is there. He's a rescue battalion chief. Joe Downey's there. Jimmy McQuaid's there. And I don't remember who else was there. But we're throwing some stuff in the Suburban, and we're going to head down there. Get down there and just can't believe what's going on. Just can't believe it. Everybody kind of goes their own way. I run into a guy who was a friend of mine who helped me do some work on my house, John DeLeo. He was in 116 truck when I knew him, but I think at this time he might have been in 126. Great guy, good fireman, loves the job. He recently retired. I get over where the command post was, because I found out where the command post was of the Trade Center. And I go over that way. I'm making my way through the World Financial Center. It had got crushed too, but I was able to make my way because I'd been down there. I knew the place. I was familiar with the whole thing because we had runs down there all the time.
Right, in your first company.
I made my way around the back and come out where that driveway was, where some of those guys that end up going into the driveway underneath the World Financial Center lived. Gansey didn't. I don't remember who else it was that went the other way that lived, but we were right there in that spot, and so, and John DeLay goes to me, he goes, Mike, you're the big rescue guy. What do we do here? I'm like, John, this is bigger than everybody. This has got nothing to do with that. There's nothing written for this stuff. So we just saw a bunch of voids, started going in and clearing stuff out, doing as much as we could. We did that for hours. And by that time, I ran into a couple of other guys from SOC and Bob Ingram, who was the chief. He became the chief of hazmat, but I think he was the executive officer at the time. And he knew I was part of the FEMA stuff. So he says, we're getting the FEMA stuff brought over. We're going to set up. And that's what SOC's going to work out of over on Chambers Street, the parking lot of Manhattan College. So they brought the trucks over, the equipment, everything else. The cops set up there, ESU command post, like down the block from us. And I think it was a couple of days before I went home. First, doing the search stuff, then getting that stuff set up, and then getting everything ready. And it turned out where myself, Captain Freddie LaFamina, Captain Steve Spoll, end up running the SOC part. Well, we're like the SOC rescue managers, I guess, because at that point, John Norman became like the interim chief of SOC. And you could hear him on the radio all the time and everything. And guys keep breaking my chops all the time now, because I say every time I go down there, oh yeah, Mike Roy on the air, Mike Roy on the air, Mike Roy, we need this, Mike Roy. You know, it was just because me, Freddie, and Steve, you know, kind of, there was like 15 different SOC teams operating at one time throughout the whole trade center, and we got it all organized that everybody was in a particular quadrant. We knew which one it was. Each quadrant had a command post. The fire department had a command post, and we only had 2 rescue battalion chiefs left after this: Jack Spillane and Bill Siegel. They were the only 2 rescue battalion chiefs left. All the rest of them were killed. So either Siegel or Spillane would be at the fire department headquarters, and we were using the FEMA radios. So all our teams had FEMA radios, and I had both. Spillane would call me and tell me what he wanted or what he needed. Like, I need a team here, I need a team there. And I would get a hold of the teams. We had a whole command post set up, communications, and we get them operating in different spots. And a bunch of different times I go out to the different spots where they're working, making sure they had what they needed. We had a cache set up for the SOC guys. At that point, we were more SOC than we were FEMA. And then we had a forward cache that we made to get things a lot closer to the scene. That was in the World Financial Center. And it was just a whole lot of, you know, digging and searching for days, weeks. It worked out pretty good because there were some officers that actually came up to us, me, Freddie, and Steve, you know, throughout the time we were there, that said, listen, we really like the way you guys are running this, because when the team at first, company rescue squads, they were all just showing up and going to work on the pile or whatever. And then when we got organized after like a day or two, then it was like, all right, the officers, you know, report into the SOC command post. So we could disperse guys. All right, you guys, because we know where their companies generally were. We were generally going to make sure they were operating in where their companies were. So everybody would report there. And guys, when they were leaving for their tour, they'd give us ideas of what's going on. And, you know, like what they did, who they found. And then we would give that in like a quick debriefing to when the guys reported in. So it's like, yeah, this happened. So, you know, I had a little roll call in the beginning there, and then they all left. And I think some of them appreciated that. But the work that the guys from SOC companies were doing was incredible. Whenever there was a recovery, got to get a SOC team over there. You know, whether it's a rescue or squad, you know, all the teams, you know, some of them were mixed and matched, but we got them all out there. And then when they finally went to recovery after 3 weeks, we broke down the SOC command post, packed up all equipment. And then at that point, there was a rescuing squad 24/7 every day until I think May 30th, when they finally said, that's it. We're at the bottom, nothing else. So at that point, when everybody come back to the companies, we were on an ABC schedule. They took all the captains out of the companies, especially the SOC companies, took all the captains out because they had funerals to run. And 61 didn't lose anybody, neither did 270. So Captain Banker, who was the captain of 61, was best friends with Dennis Cross, who was a battalion chief that was killed.
Right.
So he became the family liaison for that. So he did everything for that, and they needed to fill a spot. So when I got back to SOC headquarters after we broke everything down, they're like, oh, we need an officer for 61. And I looked at him, I said, I'll take it. You know, if you want me to, I'll take it. And they're like, yeah, you want? Absolutely. I saw these guys from 61 come down there every single day, couldn't do more, asked to do more, and stepped up for everything. I was like, this is like a stand-up company. I couldn't believe these guys. You know, they didn't lose anybody. You know, they're one of the newest squads or whatever, you know, and I knew Sean Genovese was the lieutenant in one of those, and Pete Renfola was the other lieutenant. And Pete and I were in the academy together, and he has a locker right next to mine. We were in the same battalion when we got assigned, so we ran into each other all the time. And I was like, yeah. And Johnny Hopkins, who got promoted out of Rescue 3, he was the other officer there, but he ended up going 288. So they needed a spot. So I'll take it. If you let me have it, I'll take it. I'd love to go up there. So went up there and filled that spot for a while, had a bunch of jobs with the guys. And then they were like, we need volunteers. And I get a phone call from Jimmy McQuaid one day. And he goes, I need guys. We're starting hammer teams because that's when the anthrax started. I need guys. We have 2 ESU cops going out in vans doing hazmat calls. And hazmat's the fire department's gig. So we need a fireman who's hazmat trained to be in the ESU truck. So I asked every one of the guys getting off duty because the 24-hour, work limit thing, as far as I was concerned, was out the window. And I don't think anybody else was really abiding by it. At that time, the department needed guys. And I remember Gansey saying once when Ladder 126 didn't have a chauffeur and they didn't let the backup chauffeur take it in and there was a job because like, oh, well, you didn't let the backup chauffeur. Well, when I was on the job, Gansey, when I was on the job back in the day, we would have had the backup guy. Yeah, but if the backup guy hit somebody or hit a car, you would have hung him to dry. So it's like, they didn't do that. And I thought back to that. I was like, you know what? This department needs everything it can get right now. The time clock is out the window as far as I'm concerned. So, and as far as I know, SOC thought the same way. So I asked everybody that was getting off duty because we were doing straight up 24s. I said to everybody, they need guys for hammer teams down at Pier 92, the new OEM, temporary OEM, because OEM was in Building 7. And that was the third building to collapse. And I think it was a couple hundred feet away from that building when it started going down.
It was like 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah. So everybody except one guy. And the one guy, he couldn't do it. I got my kids. I'm like, my wife's not, you got to do what you got to do. Family comes first. Got to do what you got to do. Everybody else, we all went down to Pier 92. The cops started calling the vans back one by one, putting a guy in each one. And we filled 15 vans. And we had every borough. And then that was happening for a little bit. So it was like you do that for, I think we're doing 12-hour tours with that because the cops were doing 12s. And then we get 12 off and go back and do another 12, get 12 off and go do a 24 back in the company again. So that worked for a couple of weeks. And Bob Ingram was, at that point, knew me because what was going on with setting up the FEMA stuff, SOC stuff. And he was running it, but he's like overwhelmed. As far as I was concerned, I'm looking at this guy's everywhere. He can't be everywhere. I mean, he was tired. And anything that was something that was an anthrax thing, he's showing up to. So finally, I was just like, I was getting to the point where the captain banker said to me, he goes, listen, I'm coming back. So, you're gonna leave. I said, all right. So I talked to Ingram and I said, listen, if you want, and I'm not saying I want to come to hazmat, but if you want, you need somebody down here. You need somebody to run what's going on down here. You got enough going on. I'll do it for you. I'll do all this. So he said, yeah, fine. He got, gave me a car, radio, the phone, the whole 9 yards. And he got me 3 lieutenants to man the secret FEMA headquarters, command post, where ESU and FDNY were together. So doing that forever. And then after that, it was like, okay, we did that. And then the plane crashes in the Rockaways. So I'm at Hazmat Battalion, which is over at the Rock. And they're teaching guys now, because this class is going on, they're teaching guys that are coming into the squads and the rescues now. So they take, we get a call on the phone. Hey, a plane just went down in the Rockaways. And we're like, what? We look out the window and you could just see that big black column of smoke going up in the distance. So I'm like, all right, I'm out of here. And they go next door to rescue school. And Jerry Mirth is there, Mickey Conboy, two other guys. I don't remember who it was. And I was like, a plane just crashed into Rockaways. You coming? And they kind of looked at each other and they're like, let's go. So they jumped in the Suburban and we shot down there, and it was just a horror show, you know. Turns out me and one of my neighbors, who was he was a SOC chief's aide for John Paolillo, and Steve, he barely made it out of the building. Paolillo got killed, but he barely made it out of the building. And he was down there. We started, you know, forcing doors to houses, you know, searching houses down there to see if anybody else was trapped or whatever. And after that was over, we made our, you know, had everything all squared away with the PD and our hazmat, haz-tech units and hammer teams. So what we did was we were going to turn everything over to the PD. We weren't going to be with them anymore, and we were going to have our own hammer teams. So what happened was on, I think, Christmas Eve, we switched and made it to, you know, just 2 or 3 hammer teams throughout the job. And I told Chief Ingram, I said, listen, I got everything squared away at SOC, manpower-wise, this, that, it's all good. So it runs itself. And the battalion chief of hazmat was like, I got to be in charge of this now? You know, yeah, chief, you got nothing to do. So Freddie LaFamina at that point was just like, Mike Roy's got everything squared away for you. What's the problem? Everything's good. So I went back to bouncing in SOC. And then the spot in 61 came up officially, and I put in for it, and they gave it to me. And it was great. I had great guys down there. And we had to train new guys because the rescues took guys from squads, and now the squads had to find guys because it was overwhelming amount of guys that got promoted, got killed, retired, and left. And now you just want to throw a rescue full of guys that haven't been through all the schools. So you got the squad guys who've been there, and those guys stepped up and said, yeah, I'll go to these rescues. Joey DiBernardo was one of them. Joe Light, he's a lieutenant in Rescue 3 now. There was one other guy there. And Andy Gorn went to Rescue 4. Jason Faso went to Rescue 1. So squads were losing guys. And then we had to bring guys in. So the boss who was there, well, it wasn't Banker at the time, I don't think. I think Spall started interviewing guys and, you know, bringing guys over that had less experience in engine companies or something somewhere. So we started getting these guys trained right away. And I told these guys, listen, we're going to train twice a day. You know, we got to train twice a day. We got to get you up to speed as fast as we can. And every one of them wanted to do it. Like, whatever you want to do, let's go, Lou, let's do it. And I was studying for the captain's test. It was coming around. It was like in a couple of weeks, I think, from before after 9/11. So put the books away. Then they come out with another test, and I told some of the senior men in the squad, I'm going to go study for an hour. Once you guys give them like an engine drill, you know, or take out a tool, let the, you know, give some of the senior guys, make them feel like they're part of the whole thing. And they loved it too. They're like, yeah, sure, Lou, no problem. And that worked out, gave those guys that were studying too for lieutenant, I said, listen, you guys studying, you know, you studying, go take a couple hours, go study for a while. You know, give them a chance, and I'll take the other guys, the new guys, and I'll go over stuff with them. So they appreciated that, you know, extra time. And it worked out for most of them, because most of the guys I worked with got promoted out of 61. A couple of them retired, but most of them got promoted. So it was a great transition there. Being a boss, having the 9/11 stuff behind you, being in rescue companies, covering in South Jamaica. But the one job that sticks out in my head is Kevin Yost was driving me. We get a call for a fire in a private dwelling, dead end street off of East Tremont Avenue. I grew up in Parkchester, East Tremont. I lived on East Tremont. We get to the corner, and you know, people park in the city. They park in the crosswalk. They're all the way out into the, you know, out into the street. So Kevin makes the turn, and it's a one-way street, cars on both sides. And basically, you're only going to fit a rig down there. He pulls around the corner and he just stops right as he taps the car's bumper that's sticking out on the right-hand side on the corner. And I look down and I'm like, oh man. And I'm looking down the block and I see people doing this number, waving you in. And you see smoke, and it's like, go, Kevin. He's like, I'm touching the car. I don't care. Just go. So he goes. We give the car a little push with the rig. He's able to get in. We get down there. Smoke's blowing out of the basement. Fire's blowing out. An oil burner, you know, the whole thing. It got the basement going. So later on, the chauffeur from 47 truck comes over to Kevin Yost. He goes, hey, thanks for moving that car out of the way. I wasn't going to be able to make it. You know,
Worked out.
And then we get a run one night. It's October 5th, 2002. David Wells is pitching for the Yankees. And, yep, there he is. He wasn't doing so good that day. So the guys are like, oh, come on, Lou, let's go get the meal. All right, whatever you guys want to do. So we get in the rig, pull out of quarters, we make a left on East Chester. And just as we get to the corner of East Chester and Water Street, the MDT goes off. Fire in a private dwelling over in the country club area. Now, that's an area you never go to. There's no fires over there. Nothing happens.
Super rich.
Very well maintained neighborhood. Everybody takes care of themselves. Nothing happens. So I'm sitting there in my uniform, you know, and I'm like, okay. So I take off my seatbelt, start putting on my pants, and then the chauffeur goes to me, Brian Regano. He goes, Lou, I don't know where that is. Because we never really get over there much, and that's not our first due area. He goes, I don't really know where that is. So I'm like, all right. So I break out the map. I got my pants up, and I'm all right, going through the map. He goes, all right, never mind. I know where it is. All right. I put the map down. I start getting dressed again, get my coat on. You better look it up again. I don't know where that is. So I bring out the map again. And, you know, I got the red light over me, shining on the map, and I'm looking and I'm trying to find. I can't even find this street on the map. And I'm looking and, you know, hitting the siren with my foot, hitting the air horn, you know, just going and peripherally just when we come up the intersections. So we're going across Middletown Road, do a quick little turn. Now we're on the overpass of Country Club Road. And because of our siren going, the air horn, I know we're going over I-95 now because I can see it out of my peripheral. And then all of a sudden, I look up and I said, because Brian told me, I told him, look out. And there was 50 truck in the intersection. So we got T-boned by 50 truck in the intersection. Brian gets, that's the rig. Brian gets ejected out of the rig into the street.
Sheesh. I
get ejected, but because we have like a desk on the front dashboard of the officer side, I think that prevented me from going all the way into the street.
Right.
Thank God. Because when Brian went into the street, he was still awake. He was still conscious. He looked and saw the rig coming, reached up and like grabbed the bumper so he didn't get run over because the rig was still going. Went over a curb, went into a bunch of bushes, and the rig stopped. I went out through the windshield. The windshield got knocked out on both sides. I got pinned in there, like the door was pinned. The guys behind me were pinned. I go out and I'm face down against the grill of the rig. The two guys on the other side, Tony Ziola, original 61 guy when they made the squads, and Tommy, Daly. Daly from 41. Brad Daly from 41's on the other side. He was detailed. I got Vick DeVenny behind me and Chuck Patagano. I'm out. The guys on the one side of the rig can't get out of the rig. They can't open the door because we got hit so hard it crumpled the cab that they couldn't open their door. They had to roll down the window and climb out. So they climb out the window. They come around the front of the rig, and they didn't see Brian because he was under the rig. So they're over the bushes, and Tony Ziola sees me, and I'm unconscious. And he says, he tells me later on, Lou, I thought you were freaking dead. I couldn't believe it. The blood was pouring out of your head. You were just laying there. But then I, grabbed you and pushed you up, and you were alive. So he put me back in the seat. And I think the one thing Scotty Maxwell was wanting to ask what I asked him to do, because I was unconscious for a little while. Then Rescue 3 is actually, I think, cut us out of the cab. They had to cut Victor and Chuck out from behind me, and then had to cut me out. And I was like in and out of consciousness during that time. And one part of the consciousness, I saw the door open, and I saw Scotty standing there. And I looked at him and said, Scotty, take my foot off the siren. Because the siren was still going the whole time.
Still going, yeah.
That it was still going. So that was basically the end of my career at that point, because I had a traumatic brain injury, 3 levels of fusion in my neck, 2 levels in my low back, rotator cuff destroyed, knee destroyed, vertigo. I mean, it was just like, I didn't think I wasn't able to come back. I thought I was. I went to the medical office, and Chief Kelly, chief medical officer, she goes, Lou, you're not going to be able to go back to work. And I was like, really? She's like, yeah, you got a traumatic brain injury, and with your vertigo, you're not going back to work. Gosh, okay. Like, what are you going to, and that was kind of it at that point. Somebody else was asking you about the David Wells thing.
That's Mike Milner.
He, the day he was pitching his perfect game, I took a detail in the summer to the small boats on Jamaica Bay. So I was like, you know what? Someday I want to be chief of a rescue battalion, and I want to have a very broad. I mean, I've worked on the boats. I did overtime in the boats, everything else. But I want a broad spectrum of this. So I worked on the boat. Mike Milner was one of the guys I worked on the boat with. And that day he pitched, we're just cruising in to get lunch at one of the canals in Brooklyn. And all of a sudden I hear on the Marine radio, David Wells pitched a perfect game. And I'm like, what? And so we get in there, we get into the place, they had the TV on, and I'm like, oh, of all the days, I mean, he's gotten me tickets to get, we're friends. We've been friends for 30 years, I think.
Really?
30 years at least. Him and my brother were best friends. And one time I had gone down to Florida, he was with the Blue Jays, and their spring training was in Dunedin, the city I lived in. And the city, my friend George Trubig, who popped up there on a question, he just retired as a lieutenant there. We were friends, me and George, been friends since like 1978 or 9 or something. But my brother became friends because he had an auto detail business, and he was doing all the players' cars. And one referral after another, after another, after another. And him and Dave became best friends, hanging out, drinking all the time. And
sounds like David Wells.
Down there, yeah, came out Dave Wells drinking. My brother introduced me to him, and I said, yeah, I'm in New York. He goes, oh, man, let me know. Here's my number. Let me know when you're up. I'll get you tickets to the game, and blah, blah. So we became good friends, go out drinking after games and stuff. And it was his game that if we didn't get out of quarters when we did. You ever watch The Hunt for Red October?
Yes.
When Sean Connery told him to turn the sub into the torpedo, because it was armed to hit the torpedo at a different location, timing-wise. If he turned into it, the torpedo would just bounce off of the sub. if we were in quarters another 35 seconds, we would have never got hit at that intersection. It was one of those things that 89 and 50 were first due out there. We were already out on the road. So what are you going to do? I mean, things happen.
Right.
Sean Genovese, because after the accident, everybody from the company came into the hospital. We're all hospitalized, you know, on and yours. They had to take Brian to hospital for special surgery because his pelvis got shattered. But the company did a great job. I love every one of those guys. I'll never forget what they did for me and my family. You know, I thank my wife for keeping everything, you know, afloat at home and taking care of me, because it took years and years of rehabilitation, you know, with a brain injury and everything else. And it was a long road. I mean, I'm still going down that road, although it's a lot better now. But if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't be in the spot that I'm in now. But the guys at 61 were a home run. I'm glad I went there. They didn't disappoint me at all. I knew what I was going there for, and it was great. Those guys, they stepped up. And Sean Genovese said when I was in the emergency room, I'm laying there, the doctor, because my ear kind of got split in half and I had a chunk taken out of my head, and the plastic surgeon's in there sewing me up, and I'm laying there, and Sean goes, "You're kind of conscious now and kind of with it. And you didn't really know the extent of it, but you knew it was bad. But you're laying there saying, how come fire trucks don't have airbags?" You know, even after, you know, going through a windshield and everything else. And he kind of looked at me, started laughing. He's like, "You know what? You know, he always with the mustache. Oh, good point." So one other quick little world comes together. When I was in second engine, Stanley Jessamine, chauffeur, great guy. After 9/11, he's like, "Can we," you know, he had reservations to go on vacation to Hawaii in October. Guys told him, "Stanley, you got to go." "No, I can't go. 9/11. "Stanley, you got to go. You got the reservations." So he goes. Some guy, I don't know who it is. Some guy from Pinellas Park was on vacation in Hawaii. They're sitting in a hot tub. They don't know each other. They each don't know they know me. They're sitting in a hot tub and they're talking about 9/11 and everything else and blah, blah, blah. And Stanley's sitting there in the hot tub, not saying a word. And one guy goes, "Yeah, one of the guys you used to work in our department, he went to New York." And Stanley goes to the guy and goes, "Who? Mike Roy?" And the guy goes, "How do you know Mike Roy?" And I was like, Stanley's like, "I used to work with him." How can that happen? Hawaii, Florida, New York. That's the small world thing.
That's insane. Wow.
One more small world. The guy who taught me how to drive a rig in Florida, the badge number 1, Blair Bender, he came up on vacation. I didn't know he was coming. Multi-unit drill, we go down by Marine One, which was the old pier down by Battery Park. We go down there for multi-unit drill. Him and his family on vacation. I don't know they're coming. He and his wife and his daughter walk up to a couple of guys like, you know, he's a real Southerner. "Hey, you guys know Mike Roy?" "Yeah, sure we do. He's right there." And he goes over, and I'm like, "You got to be kidding me. Blair, he goes, "Yeah, we're on vacation." "Oh, okay." No smaller world than the FDNY. It's unbelievable. You go anywhere. Guys can tell you, they go on vacation somewhere, somebody's on the job that knows somebody that knows somebody knows somebody. It's unbelievable. So the David Wells picture you showed.
Yeah, pull back up right now.
After 9/11, Dave is a very, very, very generous guy. He has his own foundations. He wanted to donate to the Silver Shield Foundation. So he called me up one day and said, "Listen, because every year he has a celebrity softball game at Legends Field in Tampa. And he goes, I want a fireman and a cop. So I said, well, I know who the fireman's going to be. What cop you getting? So he starts laughing. He goes, yeah. He goes, you know you're coming. He goes, there was a detective that drove me around, the trade center. So I'm going to get him. So I'm like, oh, okay. So with that being said, we went down there. All these stars that he had playing in the game, like the roster was unbelievable. I mean, Johnny Damon, actors. Tom Arnold was the captain of the other team. It was amazing. I mean, I had the video of the softball game. That was a good, fun game. Kirk Gibson of the Kansas City Royals.
And the Dodgers, too, 1988 walk-off.
I tagged him where you shouldn't tag anybody, but I didn't know as I swung the glove around when he was coming to home plate. I was down on my knees. I got him in the wrong spot, but he was a good sport about it. But it was a lot of fun. So then Dave wanted us, me and I call him Sipowicz, Danny Callum. Great guy. He wanted both of us to come to, the stadium where he was going to present the check. So that's when he presented it. I believe it was in 2002, maybe.
Yeah, David Wells was, like I said off the air, David Wells had 2 stints with the Yankees, 1997 to 1998. He won a World Series with the Yankees in 1998. Then he came back after a few years with some other teams. Well, he got traded for Roger Clemens, and then he came back in 2002 and stayed through 2003. So it must have been 2002 because this is after 9/11.
Okay. Yeah, he's a super generous guy. And now he's doing the Tunnels to Towers Foundation.
Yeah, he's great.
He's involved with them too. So, like I said, one of the most generous guys I know.
Yeah.
So
great pitcher, great man.
I pretty much took up most of your time. I don't think you really got a chance to get a question in there.
That's fine.
Sorry about that.
No, don't apologize.
Feel
That
free.
was great. That was great. I mean, you covered everything I wanted to ask. I mean, I sat back gladly, and I've done this twice this week. I did it with my previous guest. I did it tonight, where it went, we're over 3 hours now, but I was more than content, and so is the chat, to just sit back and listen. Because I always tell the guest, and you know this because you follow the show, it's your story. The show has my name on it, but it's your hour or hours upon the stage. However you feel you want to tell the story, what I'm going to do is gladly stay out the way and let you tell it. And we covered everything from Pinellas Park through the FDNY, through SOC, through the end of your career. So you did a great job. You answered all my questions. I don't even have to ask you the rapid fire because you covered all that too. So you did a great job. So before we sign off, and there's a lot of people, actually, let me acknowledge them before we do.
The only regret I do have, though.
Go ahead.
I took the captain's test. I passed.
You did.
And I retired before they got to my number. I couldn't stay long enough. They wouldn't keep me long enough to get to my number.
So if not for the injury, that probably would have been next up on the
docket.
docket.
Would have been the next step to taking the chief's test and becoming that rescue battalion chief that I always wanted to become.
Yeah.
So, and Kevin Murphy, who I was a fireman with in 41, he took my spot in 61 as a lieutenant.
Yes.
He called me up one day and he said, hey, Mike, I want to let you know we're getting promoted Friday. And I was like, oh, okay. Because I was a few numbers ahead of him and I was in that group to get promoted. I was like, okay, thanks, Kev. Thanks for letting me know. And I told my family, we were eating dinner at the time. I told my family. And I think my daughter was 9 years old. She goes, who was that, Daddy? I said, that was Kevin Murphy. He said he was getting promoted and then I would have been getting promoted too. She goes, getting promoted to what? I said, captain. We both would have got promoted together. I mean, we grew up in Wilson Park together. We worked at 41 together, lieutenants together at SOC. And so, yeah, we got promoted together. She goes, don't worry, Dad. We'll call you captain. And I was like, at that point, like, all right, I don't need to get made captain now. That was enough.
Yeah.
So
it all evens out.
Yeah. That just melts you right there when it comes out of the little one. So.
Yeah. You could be I never forget when one of my lieutenants, he's retired lieutenant, but he's our department historian, Bill Heffernan told me, and I'll clean up the quote a little bit for the show. He's like, you could be the hardest guy in the world. When your kids or your grandkids say stuff like that to you, it melts that facade right away.
Absolutely.
And I'm paraphrasing him, but I never forgot him telling me that because he's got 2 grandchildren now, and it's true. It's true. I'm gonna shout out to a couple people because I don't want to go off the air without acknowledging them. Pete Pranzo, retired NYPD street crime lieutenant and author. He's here. Jeff Pinkett, John Costello, of course, who I mentioned earlier. Joe Malik, I'll get to your question momentarily. We can end with that. FDNY Riggs is here. Jennifer Skinner says hello to you. She says, Mom and Dad would be so proud of you. Did a wonderful job tonight. James Roy says, excellent job. So proud of you. So glad you're still here. And let's see who else. Oh, Joe Maliga's question. So you know this from the show as well. And this is going to be the last question tonight. Is, as you know, he always asks anytime I have a PD or FD guest on, he's a retired correctional officer from upstate. Did you ever deliver a baby?
In Florida.
There you go. It counts.
The amount of EMS runs that we ran down there, 7 codes in the 24-hour period. I don't know anybody who's done 7 codes in a 24-hour period.
No, I don't either.
7 codes.
Jeez.
I think there was 2 babies in my career down there. Yeah, it was 2. None up here, but 2 down there. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
And, a shout out to my brother-in-law, Steve Skinner, retired captain out of Tampa, my homie.
I think he's in the chat, too. I think I saw him.
He might be. He's a great guy.
Yeah, he is.
Great guy.
Yep, he says, I'm from Tampa, did a few ride-alongs with Mike at Squad 41 Rescue 4. Unbelievably amount of fires we went to in such a short amount of time, and I believe it. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in tonight. This has been a fantastic show, and these encompass 2 of the and I'm not complaining because it's fine. It's great content. 2 of the longer interviews in the history of the show, but the good thing is you get the full library because, as you know, guys get older, and the stories eventually your children, when they're old enough, not you specifically, but in general, or your grandchildren are going to ask, gee, what did grandpa do? Or what did dad do? That's the beauty of this podcast. Guys, come on. Gals, come on too. And they can share what they did. But this was a really fun show. Stick around. We'll talk off here. I'd like to thank everybody that tuned in tonight, whether you were watching on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter/X, where I first found out, of course, about the lieutenant, as I mentioned earlier. You guys always make this show a lot of fun to do, and the guests as well are just top notch. And I only get them because you guys recommend them, and you guys motivate me to be the best interviewer and podcaster that I can be, and keep churning out fantastic shows like this. Thanks to guests like this. So thank you very much. And of course, we'll see you next week. So coming up next on the Mike the New Haven podcast, 2 interesting shows. He was never in law enforcement himself, but he did a lot of security work in the private sector that's fascinating, and we're going to hear about this. He was recommended to me, speaking of recommendations. Paul DeMattis, who has a fascinating story from the private sector, will be here. And next Friday, she was a news anchor for a long time, including for a few years at Channel 4, I think about 4 or 5 years, if not a little bit longer than that. And she's doing very well for herself in the private sector now. I'm going to hear about her career in television because I remember watching her on Channel 4 as a reporter and anchor, and that's Carrie Barrett. So a couple of interesting shows coming up. We mix it up. We'll get back to Best of the Bravest soon, as well as all the other PD-related shows that we do here. But in the meantime, on behalf of everyone who tuned in tonight and FDNY Lieutenant Mike Roy, I am Mike Colón, and we will see you next time. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Mike.